Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting back to order. Welcome to the council meeting of January 27th, 2020. I'd like to start tonight's meeting in memory of Bob Gregory, who was the Director of Emergency Operations here in Princeton for many years. For those of you who knew Bob, he was a wonderful man. He's probably the best person I could think of to have around during a crisis. And it's really hard to think of this place without him. And our hearts are with his family. And please join me for a moment of silence. And now please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we're going to start with announcements, and I'm actually going to give the first announcement before I turn it over to Councilwoman Perrin-Lambros. We had last week indicated that we would have the redevelopment plan on tonight's agenda for Thanet. We're actually not ready for that tonight. We're going to be holding a special meeting this Thursday at 7 p.m. back here in this room for that. So if you're here for Thanet redevelopment, sorry you had to come all this way. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but that will not be on the agenda for tonight, and we hope to see you back on Thursday. And I will turn it over now to Councilwoman Perrin-Lambros with any announcements.
Just a brief announcement on behalf of the Environmental Commission. The Princeton Environmental Commission had its first meeting of the year, and one of the things that was highlighted was interest in a plastics ordinance of some kind, since the state unfortunately did not pass that. So just a heads up to everyone that we'll be focusing first on education and assessment of what the what the plastics ordinance will include, and you'll be hearing more about that throughout the year. Thank you.
No announcements.
I have just a few. On behalf of the Health Department, would like to announce that the Health Department is providing anyone without insurance free flu shots. Anyone 6 months of age or older can get one. And to make an appointment, please contact the Health Department. Also, there's a free rabies clinic for dogs and cats that is being offered to Princeton residents. It's going to take place on March 7th from 9 to 11 a.m. at the Witherspoon Street Firehouse. There's no appointment necessary for that. And because it's in the news, definitely if you want to be informed regarding the coronavirus, there's updates that are available on the municipal webpage. And then on behalf of Human Services, I announced it at our last council meeting, but as a reminder, Human Services is going to be hosting two welcoming Princeton local trainings, and the deadline to register for those is February 7th. Visit Human Services webpage for more information and also to register.
None.
Mr. No, okay. I just have a couple more announcements. First, I'm going to be holding my monthly Meet the Mayor open office hours this upcoming Friday, January 31st from 8:30 to 10 a.m. at the Princeton Public Library. And also on February 7th, on Friday, the town will, or the municipality will be in court for our fairness hearing. And this is part of the affordable housing process. We have our settlement agreement. The fairness hearing is hopefully to have the court bless that settlement agreement. We feel we have a solid plan. We actually are exceeding our affordable housing obligation, and we're doing it in a way that meets smart growth principles and also meets several community needs, including senior housing and housing for developmentally disabled adults. If we are successful at the fairness hearing, then we'll be moving into the compliance phase. That will involve amending our master plan, the housing element in our master plan, adopting ordinances and agreements, and all of that will be a public process. Usually the court will grant about 4 to 5 months for that. Then we'll be back in court for our compliance hearing. So I wanted to give an update about that. And are there any staff announcements? Chief?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to announce that this Friday, the 31st at 11 a.m., we will hold our annual remembrance ceremony for the loss of Officer Walter Harris, who was a police officer with Princeton who lost his life in the line of duty. We hold that yearly. It'll be at 11 a.m. This Friday right out front in the courtyard at his memorial site.
Any other staff announcements? Okay, we'll move on then to comments from the public for items that are not already on the agenda. Is there anybody who'd like to speak to something that's not already on the agenda? Okay, we do have a lot on the agenda, so pretty much anything you could think of saying is already on the agenda, I understand. All right, next we come to reports, and we'll start with the chief with the November police report.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple brief points I'd like to make. First of all, on a very serious note, we've talked about this occasionally at council, and I like to highlight it for awareness. Over the last month, Princeton's had 3 suspected opioid overdoses in our community. 2 were fatal. 1 was extremely serious. I bring this up for 2 reasons, as I have in the past. It's for awareness, and I just want to reiterate to the public that calling us and notifying us in the case of an overdose is of paramount importance, and the Overdose Prevention Act prohibits the charging of anyone for possession or being with someone that is overdosed. So that's super important for our community to know that if they call, they're with someone that has overdosed and the person's in need of medical attention, we have the capability of administering an antidote that can save the person's life. And it's about time and us getting there in time. So just want to reiterate that, and we'll continue to work with our partners like Corner House. We're working with Mercer County as well, prosecutor's office, with our Helping Hands Care Act. If you don't know what that is, that's a program that we have countywide that when we come in contact with a person, whether it's through a law enforcement action or a medical action, that we partner with programs that can get a person into treatment that day. No questions asked, paid for. So it's of paramount importance that the community knows they can come to us without repercussions, and it's all about awareness and saving lives. And it again shows that this is a epidemic that just does not discriminate. It's affecting everyone. So I just want to, it's a sad way to bring it to everyone's attention again, but it deserves highlight. It deserves attention. With regard, just a couple highlights from the report from November. I just bring your attention to the Safe Neighborhood Bureau, and I do so because we, a couple months ago, as you know, had the retirement of Sergeant Williams, who was a real, he was a bigger-than-life figure in that unit, and we were really sad to see him go, but I can't be more proud of the effort that the unit has picked up in his absence. So I hope that you see that our social media presence is as vigorous as ever, and they're continuing all the work that he put in place. So that's a good thing. We never replace him, but work goes on. Also, I just highlight our speeding enforcement, as that's been a major concern of the public and council. We continue to target the problem areas in town you'll see that speeding enforcement's been up. The complaints are still very prevalent, and rightfully so, and we're working to address them through lots of different mitigation techniques that we try to use. And finally, I always bring use of force incidents to your attention when they appear in that month. This month, we did have one use of force incident. That use of force, after I researched it, was the result of a situation of an assault where there was one individual being kind of brutally assaulted by another. When officers arrived trying to remove the one individual, the assault occurred on the officers, and they had to deploy what we call oleo capsicum spray, which is OC spray, or mace, some people know it by. One of our less lethal, causes no lasting effect, but is able to subdue somebody without any repercussions. So it ended well. It's a minor use of force, as luckily most of ours are, but you see how we report it and want to be transparent about all of them. And I could take any questions.
Questions for the chief?
I have.
Yep, Ms. Fargo?
Just because we will be talking about parking later on following this, if you could just explain on the numbers for parking violations. I noticed that both for the meters and for, what was the other one, for parking limit of 2 hours, there's a big jump in the number of parking violations from November 2018 to November 2019. If you could just let us know what was going on
Yeah, it's
there.
directly due to staffing and the transition we took with staffing with part-time and covering longer hours. So that's what I can attribute that jump from year to year.
So would you see that even it out back?
That should be, I don't see it fluctuating from here, not anticipating losses in staffing.
Yeah, but it was also pointed out we didn't have, was there an issue with the meter, the meters weren't, for some time there was, meters weren't in place.
Yes, and that's
part
correct,
of
too.
the
Yeah.
implementation of the parking program.
That's correct, too. Yes, I forgot that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Thank you. I just want, because if
Yes.
anybody else noticed, I wanted to point that out.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you very much for the report and for explaining the use of force. We always really appreciate that. I just wanted to say, getting back to your first point about speeding enforcement, if people feel that drivers are speeding on their street, can you just go over what the proper way, the most effective way to deal with that would be?
Absolutely. So
Thank
there's
you.
several ways. There's a way to report it directly to us on our website. You can call and get in touch with our traffic bureau, or just a simple email to me even, or a phone call, and we put that on a list that is disseminated throughout the department, and we'll address that through a number of ways. We'll deploy officers, traffic officers out there to monitor and enforce speed. We'll also, if we find there to be a real problem, a regular problem, we'll deploy our speed capturing devices and analyze the problems and analyze if there's any engineering issues, if it's something to do with the roadway, something that we can change, or if it's just an operator issue that enforcement can help with. And we'll do a number of things to try to bring the speed to where it needs to be. Sometimes it's effective, but it's a kind of a never-ending process that we have to rely on when it comes to enforcement.
I just want to say I really appreciate those extra resources directed there, because, as you say, one of the things we hear from over and over, people on residential streets, is the speeding, and they're concerned about their safety, their children's safety, their pets' safety. So I appreciate that that's really been stepped up.
Absolutely, and we've acknowledged that through the department. That's the number one complaint we receive as well, and it's a very high priority for us.
Did you have any other questions? All right. Are there any other questions for the chief?
Just
Yeah.
one quick one. I noticed a huge jump there for overweight vehicles. Is that because of just tougher enforcement, or are we seeing a lot more overweight vehicles?
That was direct.
costing us municipal costs on these roads.
It was related to a couple things. One was a traffic detour that was causing a lot of overweight vehicles on specific roadways and complaints. So we responded to the complaint, it went through that process I just described, observed.
Alexander Road closure.
Yeah,
Just
and
pushing
and
it.
we've tried to rectify that through communication to the different trucking companies, that they, sometimes it's a mapping issue, it's not purposeful, but it's a problem for the residents, so it's a combination of enforcement and education.
Then it also hurts our roads, and we have to spend more money to redo the roads, yeah. Thanks.
Are there any other questions for the chief? All right, thank you so much. Okay, our next report is from the Princeton Permit Parking Task Force, and are you doing it?
I'm doing it.
Okay, yeah, being chaired by Councilwoman Leticia Fraga, and I first want to thank Ms. Fraga for taking on this assignment, which is a brave thing to do, because we know the parking is the third rail. I think the goal here is to try to make it better than it is right now. I think it's one of those problems that if we come back to town in, well, I don't know, maybe in 100 years, people will have figured out a way how to get around without a car. But certainly if you go back 100 years, people were screaming at each other. And if you go back to the old newspapers, it gives me some comfort that this is a perennial problem that probably has no perfect solution, but we're looking for a better solution than what we have now. So with that wonderful introduction, I'm going to turn it over
And
to
it was a
Leticia.
wonderful introduction, though. I didn't know about the third rail when I signed up for this. But if you want to put it on the first, the screen, no, back. So go back to the first one. Sorry, can I show you? Yeah, to put it, so that we can put it in PowerPoint mode, in the presentation mode. So while you're doing that, I just wanted to give you a little bit of history for those that are not, may not already be aware. The Permit Parking Task Force was established back in May of 2019, and the purpose was to address issues and concerns that some of our residents have experienced, both with daytime and overnight parking issues. And the task force is made up of members that are diverse group of members from our community, from different neighborhoods, and also residents who are business owners. So I think we have a pretty good diverse group that is providing input from different perspectives. So this hasn't been an easy task, and I see that there's some of our permit parking task force members here. If you can please stand and be acknowledged, because you have, please. Don't be shy. Not everybody's here, Wes. Thank you. And our newest.
That's for credit, not blame.
Yes. And newest member in the back, Wes Pollard, he's our parking manager for the municipality, who has been providing just really invaluable advice. Thank you. So let me say that, so what we have been working on, we realized with time that we were not going to come up with a perfect solution that was going to be ideal for everyone. But what we hope that at the end of this process is that we're going to have a better process, a better permit parking solution that is currently in place. What we're presenting tonight is not, I just wanted to clarify that it's not a proposal. This is not our recommendations yet. What we're doing is we wanted to share with you what the task force has been discussing, and also to say that before it even makes it into a proposal for a pilot program, that is we're going to need input from mayor and council. We're going to solicit input from the community, and especially from the neighborhoods that we are going to be looking at for a potential pilot program. Does that sound right? So please, on the task force, also Mayor Lampert and Council President David Cohen is also a member of the task force. So, and Dolores as our guru of permit parking. So please feel free to chime in if there's something that I missed or I may not have entirely correct, but hopefully we did enough our homework and we have it right. If you go to the next slide, this is going to show you the streets that we're going to be, that we're looking at for a potential pilot program. And this is in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood. There is still the existing permit parking system. There's still an overlap between the former borough and the former township. And then in the Tree Streets, that's the other neighborhood that also has an existing permit parking system in place. And but we also recognize that they both may have, they're not, even though they both have a permit parking system already in place, they're not exactly the same. So as we discuss what the potential solutions may be, this is where we really need input from the community and also from the business owners that are in those neighborhoods. So next slide.
Just before you move on.
Sorry, can I back up too? We have talked about this. So I understand there was a letter in both Town Topics and Planet Princeton. And some of you may be here in response to what you read in that letter to the editor. So I had asked David if he could just give a brief response as to what, to clarify what it is that we have been discussing.
Okay, and before I do that, I just wanted to mention there are a couple of things that need to be corrected on this map. One of the solutions for employee parking permit parking that we're proposing is that we have a number of underutilized metered spaces, both meters that exist on Witherspoon Street and kiosk type space that exist on Franklin Ave and on Williams Street, which have not been highlighted. And we're planning to make employee permits available in those locations, some number of employee permits, so that those spaces are more fully utilized. And that's missing from the
Yes,
map. So
I was actually working on this right before we came to the meeting, so I may have missed something. So thank you for pointing that out.
And then just to take care of the quick summary of, I guess, the overview of the policy that we're trying to work on. Some of the implications of the letter to the editor from the both in the Town Topics and on Planet Princeton were not exactly what the group had been talking about. So I wanted to quickly go through a couple of things. Really, we've been emphasizing, prioritizing meeting the needs of residents on these residential streets first, and then secondarily meeting the needs of employees of nearby businesses and customers of those businesses. So that's the hierarchy of needs as we're trying to address them. And secondly, wanted to say that if you go look back at the Nelson Nygaard report, the professional parking consultants that were hired a couple of years ago, we feel that way of looking at parking on residential streets is consistent with what's in that report. We also wanted to make sure that people knew what wasn't part of the plan so far. First of all, it is a pilot in these two neighborhoods. We're not proposing any kind of change to the permit parking system in any other neighborhood of town at this time. So we didn't want people in the high school neighborhood or in the western section to become alarmed No, we really don't have any policy proposals for those neighborhoods at that time. It's not that we're not going to look at them at some point in the future, but these two neighborhoods were where we get the most complaints from, that the parking system as it exists is not working for the residents. And so that's why we're addressing these two neighborhoods first. We're trying to solve those problems. In these other neighborhoods that I just mentioned, we're not hearing that there are problems, and that's why we're putting them off to a second phase of implementation. To the extent that we have in the task force talked about the high school area, what we've actually been talking about is reducing the number of locations where students are currently allowed to park. Right now, there are a number of streets that are permit only, and students are not granted on those permits on those streets. But there are other streets like Ewing and Linden, some of the small side streets that don't have any permit regime on them at all, and those neighborhoods I understand are often referred to as junior parking because juniors aren't eligible for permits at all at the high school. So we sort of feel like that's an inequitable way to have things set up in that neighborhood. So we've been talking about perhaps limiting parking in some of those neighborhoods as well. I think that's, and then, and the last thing is that we are reaching out to the owners of private parking lots as an additional solution for employee permits. It's taking some time, and we don't know how many spaces we will identify on those kinds of private lots, but we are pursuing that as actively as we can. So that's it.
Okay. Thank you. So before I get into what it is that we're discussing, I want to first give you an overview of what's currently in place in the next slide. So starting with the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, and this is for residents of Birch, Lee, John, and Ray Street, which is the former township. Next slide. So current and under the existing permit parking program, residents with a driveway receive 1 permit, and residents with no driveway receive 2 permits. And I just wanted to clarify that these are permits that are directly mailed to them. There's no application process in place. The permits are valid for 24 hours. And there's no fee for the permit, so they're free. Also, there's no expiration for the permit. I believe, is it annual, or how often do they get sent? Is it on an annual basis, if you can clarify?
Well, at one point, it was annually that they sent out every year.
Okay.
But because we did not have an ordinance, they're still using the
same.
2017 permits. So we did not order the new permits.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. And then the next one, under the current system, residents who have overnight guests and they don't have a driveway, they're eligible to apply for 6 one-week permits in a given year, and they can't be non-consecutive. So I guess the idea was that they couldn't be abused by doing 6 consecutive weeks. And this is for the guests to park in the closest municipal lot. And the fee for those permits under the existing program is $10 per week. Now, for the residents of the former borough, currently, it's also, there's certain streets, is it Lee Avenue, if I understand correctly, that, and Lytle? No, it's Lee in the former borough.
Yes,
Where,
what I gave you is Lee.
Yeah, so there's residences that have been identified as having no driveways, and they get the same permits that residents of the former township would get. Also, residents that are within 400 feet of the McLean lot, they're eligible to apply for a 24-hour parking permit to park there, but there is a waiting list. For parking in that lot, there's a $30 quarterly fee. Is that
Not for McLean. McLean
what I
is
had.
$25 a month for 24 hours.
okay? Thank you for clarifying. I think I'm confusing it with the tree streets. So there's also non-metered on-street parking in that neighborhood. That's from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And there's also, for the first 2 hours, there's no fee. There's 3-hour meter parking along Witherspoon Street and Paul Robeson Place. And there's also, I should point out, even though technically it's not the Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood, the Franklin Avenue across the street, there's a kiosk meter parking. Also here, those that have guests for overnight, the same as in the township applies, where those without a driveway are eligible to apply for a parking permit in the closest municipal lot with a $10 per week fee. Now, for the tree streets in the neighborhood, the existing parking regime from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., there's no parking restriction except where there's meter parking. And also Pine Street has a 2-hour parking restriction. Residents without a driveway are eligible to apply for one overnight parking permit, which would be from 6 p.m. to 9 a.m., and this is where the fee, the quarterly fee is. There also, those who have overnight guests, they can apply with, and they don't have a driveway, they can apply for the permit parking in the municipal lot, $10 per week, and it's the same as in the Witherspoon Jackson.
But I just want to clarify, it's not because any guest, whether they have a driveway or not, can get.
Any guest.
Right.
Thank you for clarifying. But is that just the tree streets and the Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood? Or any resident? with
Any
a-
resident that has a guest within.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. The next one. So this is what we're looking at, what we've been discussing. And I want to again emphasize that this is for discussion. We're going to want to solicit additional input and recommendations from mayor and council and also from the community. So what we want to consider is a pilot program in the Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood and the Tree Street area. It would be short term, anywhere from 90 up to 120 days. We had a presentation from Vigilant Parking Solutions that uses license plate recognition. And from what we understand, we could use this technology and the equipment free of charge. And that's why we set that short time frame, because we could use it for that time if we wanted to do a pilot program without having to go into the expense of actually buying the equipment. If we do this pilot program, if we go ahead with it, we would want Department of Public Works to create signage that would indicate that these areas are permit parking only. But we would still keep the 2-hour parking, and this would be for visitors and guests that are visiting during the daytime. But if they require more than the 2 hours, then we would encourage to go to a meter parking spot where they could do more than the 2 hours. All residents that don't have driveways or have inadequate driveway would be eligible to apply for 1 to 2 permits. And that's to be discussed, is what is the criteria that we're going to use for eligibility. What we're proposing, what we're discussing, is that these permits would be valid for 24 hours. Next. And during the pilot program, and this would be both for the Witherspoon Jackson and the Tree Streets where we're discussing and proposing that there be no fee for the residents during the pilot program. And that for guest overnight parking, we're proposing a change here. So instead of the guest having to go to a municipal lot, we're proposing that they would be allowed to park on the street overnight, and that could be a fee of, if it's daily, $3 per day. So that way a resident wouldn't have to purchase an entire week permit if they're only going to use it for one day, or they could purchase a permit for the entire week. But again, that would be limited to no more than 6 one-week permits in a given year. But if they're doing, this is for consideration, if they're doing just daily 1, 2, 3 day parking for their guests, that it would be limited to no more than 42 days in a given year. Next. Now for the employee parking permits. This is something new, and this is to address the needs of the employees that work in the area. In the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, local non-university employers would be allowed to purchase a limited number of employee permits. Next. The employee permits, we actually verified with the company that could be providing this technology, that it is possible to make these employee permits transferable. So for employees that work, employers who have employees who work different shifts, they could accommodate that. And perhaps you could, do you want to give some detail on that now from the response we've received?
I'll just mention really briefly that the system seems ideal from the standpoint of employers, because you can buy a certain number of permits, say 10 permits, you can attach 40 or 50 license plates to those 10 permits, and then the enforcement, the license plate recognition technology and their software is able to keep count of how many of those licensed or permitted license plates are in use in the zone at any given time. So if you go above your limit of, say you bought 10 permits, then the 11th permit would be ticketed. But it seems like a really convenient solution.
Mm-hmm. Next. Employees with permits would be allowed to park in designated streets only. And what we're considering is that we would evaluate the spaces available to determine how many residents would need to park on that street and how many spaces might be available for employees to park. Next. Employees with permits would also be allowed to park in currently underutilized meter parking. So for the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, that would be on Witherspoon Street and also on Franklin Street, that is where the kiosk is. Next. The fee, we haven't gotten there yet. That's to be determined, including for a pilot program. It's something that we need more input from both mayor, council, the residents in the neighborhood, but also from the employers who, we want to, we are taking into consideration the needs for the employees, but also we want to hear from what they would consider would be a fair cost or fee to pay for that. Next, for the tree streets, local non-university employees would be allowed to purchase a limited number of employee permits. Again, this would have to be done through the employer. The employees themselves, the way we're evaluating this, the employees would not be the ones purchasing the permits. It would have to go through the employers. The employer permits, we already talked about, they would be transferable for employees who work different shifts. I put there a question mark because we hadn't gotten the response yet, but now we have it. That it kind of accommodate that. Employees with permits would be allowed to park in designated streets only. Again, like in Witherspoon Jackson, we would have to first evaluate how many residents need to park on that street and how many spaces are available for the customers and for the employees. We want to be able to accommodate both. Employees with permits would be allowed to park in currently underutilized meter parking. I was told that William Street might be one, but I'm not certain. I
Yeah.
haven't evaluated.
So we got information from Wes Pollard indicating that there are underutilized kiosk parking, all-day parking in the Olden zone, and I think whether that's just on Olden Street or on Olden and Williams. I know Williams has kiosk parking, so I see him nodding. I think.
But we would want to evaluate, are there meter parking or the ones that are by kiosks that are being underutilized that could potentially be used for employee parking with a permit? Yes. The fee to be determined. So these are other questions that I want to throw out there for consideration. One, do we consider additional meters in both Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood and the Tree Street neighborhoods? And specifically, I know for Witherspoon Jackson, there's businesses on the intersection of John and Lee Street, but there may be other solutions. But it's something that we were wondering if we needed to consider that. Do we put a cap on the number of permits? Should it be on the first come, first served policy? This would be for both residents and for employee permits. Do we consider special permits for contractors? From what I understand, is that currently the traffic enforcement officers, they understand if there's a contractor and it's in a permit parking zone, they're not ticketed. There's an understanding that they're not ticketed. But if there's a contractor that needs more than the 2 hour that's currently permitted, we need to consider how we would be able to accommodate that. Because I know it's a concern for some of the residents that may be, whether resident or business, that may be in need of having a contractor parking in their area. The next steps. First, we're going to solicit input and recommendations from mayor and council. We're starting here. Second, we're going to conduct community meetings in both the Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood and the Tree Streets, and we're going to solicit input and recommendations from neighbors and the business owners in those neighborhoods. I have already reached out to Mr. Newland about scheduling a community meeting there, and we're going to come up with some dates. As soon as we have it, we're going to announce it. The same thing with the Tree Streets. For there, we're looking at conducting a community meeting in Chestnut Street Fire Station. I'm going to be reaching out to the task force to make sure that we can agree on the date where most of us would be able to be there so that we can hear from the neighbors, and then we'll definitely be announcing when that date is scheduled. And then after that, after we've received input, the task force has evaluated and consider the recommendations and also the concerns, because we do want to hear what other concerns you may have. We're going to return to council with a more concrete plan for what the proposed pilot program would look like.
Okay, thank you. So my recommendation for this evening would be, we'll start with mayor and council. If people have questions or initial comments, I assume, looking out, that there's other people here who want to have a chance to speak on this. So we'll open it up for some public comment as well, just with the knowledge that we're going to be going out into the neighborhoods and seeking additional input. And then we'll bring it back to council to give any last words on this. And then thank you for this report, and we look forward to the neighborhood meetings and having you come back with the proposals. So, so I'll start. Is there anybody who wants to start and has some comments for the task force? Yep.
Well,
Start.
thank you to the task force. I know it's a lot of work, and it's real hard to get your head around this this process. I'm not going to ask a lot of questions because I think that the public's going to have a lot of the same questions. But I just want to throw out there, in terms of the permitting, we talked maybe about color coding it so people would know the difference between the employees and the residents. But how, if you have marked that it's permit parking on a certain street, how do you keep some places open for customers or for others? Has that been thought through? So that was one question I was thinking.
So I'm not sure if it's exactly the same, but right now in the high school zone, there is permit parking only during the academic year and during certain hours. But there's still, I believe it's 2 hours that visitors can park there.
So like a visitor zone then type of thing?
It's not
with the 2
necessarily a
hours?
zone, no.
Because when I go to the high school, if I don't get one of those couple of visitor parking, I have to walk pretty far because it's all employee park. It's all permitted for the students and faculty. So anyway, it's just something to consider. I know we can't solve it all right here.
Mr.
Yeah,
Cohen?
I'd actually like to offer a slightly different answer, which is that we're going to have a careful count of how many spaces there are on each street. And we're going to know exactly how many residents are eligible for permits, for resident permits. So say on Linden Lane, you've got 20 parking spaces. You've got 4 houses that don't have driveways. That means you have 16 spots left that can be allocated between employees and customers. Okay. And the idea would be to decide, with the help of the business community, how many employees they'd like to be able to park and how many spaces they'd like to leave available as 2-hour parking for customers. So you might get the local businesses to say, well, we know that we've got a shortage of customer parking, so we want to preserve more customer parking, and we're going to only ask for 4 employee permits on this street. But we know that across the way on Murray Ave, where it's a little bit further away and our customers might not want to walk that far,
Exactly.
we're going to put more employee spots over there. So it's going to be a very granular discussion about what's appropriate on a street-by-street basis.
By street. Okay, perfect. And my other question is, and you touched on it before, in terms of inventory, you're looking at various parking, private parking lots that might be available to do some type of open, permit parking, which would be, something that they could also find,
So
Sorry, I said-
the question was about
inventory of parking.
inventory
throughout.
of the lots, private lots.
Yeah, I was thinking of private lots. Yeah.
So we do have in the task force, a subcommittee did go out and inventory, but because for the purposes of the pilot program, we can't say that this private lot is going to be available and for how long, whether it's indefinite. And I would use one example would be in Trinity Church, where it was available at one time and now it's not. Right. So we do want to look at the private lots.
Yeah, the
Yeah, and
private
I-
owners might be interested,
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest opportunity we see in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood is the old hospital parking garage, which you can go there at any time of any day and it's half empty. And so they should be eager to sell a certain number of permits. Obviously, they make more money on somebody paying something than on nobody paying anything for those empty spots. But we have to get agreement from the owner of the parking, what's the right level, and we just haven't managed to work out those details yet.
And we weren't certain if, for the purposes of a pilot program, whether we could get that commitment and if it's going to be on a continuing basis. It was difficult to say.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I'll leave it to the public and rest of council to ask the other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I have a few questions. First, I want to be sure that this presentation will be available to the public. Some of my questions are gonna sound ignorant because it was a lot of information that I hadn't seen before, so I may be asking you things.
So
but
can I respond to that
Yeah,
one first?
yeah.
So first, I am going to share it with the clerk to include as part
Excellent.
of the minutes, but also I'm going to ask that our webmaster to put it in the page, which I understand is difficult to find, but I don't know what the solution to that would be. But Permit Parking Task Force does have a web page that is under park initiatives, and so we can put it in there as well.
Great, thank you. So I'll ask a few questions, but I hope to be able to study it in more detail. So just want to piggyback a little bit onto what Councilman Cohen said about when you do the granular street by street, as well as talking to employers. I hope you'll also be talking to the residents, because residents have visitors, residents have people who come to provide services to the home. So I hope that while
It's both.
both. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. One question I had is, what if you have somebody in one of these areas who has someone who provides personal caregiving on a daily basis? They're there, or someone is there every day. How would that fit in this system? The homeowner is then sort of an employer, but probably not an employer in the way you're conceptualizing like a merchant would be. So how does that person, that homeowner, get their needs met?
Yes.
Where does the personal caregiver
So,
park?
Deanna, so if you can let me know if I have this right. I know that there's circumstances where a homeowner may need accessible parking in front of their home, that there can be accommodations made for that. Is that correct?
We have worked with police to ordinance certain areas or parts of roads with ADA accessible parking, but it's not tied to a property. So any motor vehicle that has the plaque or has the special license plates can use that space.
Okay.
It's not exclusive to one property.
No, but I was thinking of a caregiver, so someone who would not have a handicap plate, but might, like, I don't know what people do now, but I'm wondering if that's something that's been considered as part of the...
The quick answer is that's a great question. We haven't talked about it.
Okay, all right. So I'm throwing that into the mix. Another concern that's often been raised, and again, maybe you've considered this, maybe you haven't, is especially for younger people, you might have 4 or 5 or more people sharing a house, and obviously their need then for parking is multiplied beyond the normal kind of family with a couple of kids or something like that. Has that been something that has been thought about? Because again, that's a way of making housing more affordable, is to allow a lot of people to share, but if they can't find a place to put their cars, then it becomes more complicated.
I'm going to try to address that.
Okay.
So I think one of the challenges with this whole, like, delving into this is that I think there's a recognition that families have changed since a lot of these neighborhoods were built. But also there's a recognition that what makes these neighborhoods so special, one of the things that makes them so special is their walkability. And that there's a lot of people who live there who maybe have a family with just one car. And there's a lot of different neighborhoods in Princeton. And to help keep their character, you also want to encourage a good match between the people who are moving in there and what's on the ground. So, we have these horrible stories where people will buy a house out on the ridge and they're afraid of trees, and so they'll clear cut the property. And it's like, if you don't like trees, don't live up on the ridge. If you have 3 cars, don't live in Witherspoon Jackson or the Tree Streets, because it's too tight. It's not a great place for somebody who has a giant car collection.
No, I'm thinking of like 4
right,
people
so I
sharing
think-
a house,
so-
but okay.
And so I think we're trying to. Yeah, thank you. That was pretty tepid, but I'll take it. But on the other hand, it used to be that there'd be one person who had a job, and the woman would stay at home and cook all day. I don't know. And you didn't need to drive. And so we also want to, we want to have some flexibility in there without creating a problem that the current regime is somewhat discouraging. So this is what we say, like, we want to make it better. So how do we, create some sort of pressure release valve there without encouraging, I don't think any of us have a problem with there being an apartment where, people try to save money but it's like they can't all have a car if they're living on Chestnut Street. It just doesn't work on most properties. So, and I don't think we can, as a municipality, that's not the goal of this. It's not to say every single adult is going to have access to a parking spot, because there's not room. So
I'm not
how do we do
suggesting
this-
that, so
how do
yeah.
we do this in
Yeah.
a fair way,
Yeah.
right? And I think part of making it affordable too is, this is a larger question, but how do we do a better job connecting our housing to our available jobs, to really encourage our employers to look locally, to hire, and all of those things. It's a much bigger problem than what we're talking about here, but all those, it's all tied together. And that's why it's complicated. So that's probably a longer
that was
answer than what you
a
wanted.
great answer, and I just, for the record, I want to imply I was not saying 5 people should share a house and they should all have cars, but I do know that the lack of parking is can be a hindrance for younger people who are looking, because they need to share houses. But maybe you're right; they need to live a little further out or walk a little further, since they're young anyway.
And I would also like to add that in any system that we decide on is going to be currently under the existing system, some residents automatically get a permit whether they apply for it or not. Where we're envisioning is a system where eligible residents, if it's for a residential permit, would be eligible to apply for a permit. And I say that because what I noticed in looking at, in the tree streets, especially when we looked at the streets where there's residences with driveways that have been identified residences with driveways, not everybody apply for a permit. So, that's just because someone is a resident is eligible doesn't mean they're going to apply for a permit.
Okay, thank you all.
Just a quick comment. We know historically the Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood has endured many inequities, and I just wanted to commend the task force on its diversity and having voices that will basically not to say we need to be policed, but folks have long memories and they have a lot of legitimate concerns. There were issues that came up like last year with the parking, about using the West Spring Jackson neighborhood almost as a shock absorber for the problems of parking in Princeton, particularly addressing employee parking. But I just wanted to commend really the task force, and I commend you, Mayor Lampert, for making sure we have strong voices like Mr. Mike Floyd out there, there to make sure that a lot of the equity issues are properly addressed.
Okay. So one thing I just wanted to highlight before we open it up is that the pilot is going to be testing a bunch of different things, and one of them is the new technology, which we're pretty excited about. So we had someone from Asbury Park come and visit with the task force, and it's not, the permits we're talking about are not a physical permit. It will be a digital permit, and it'll be on a license plate, and there's a license plate reader. And that technology should, I mean, it's a trial to see how well it works. But if it does work, and it's an exciting thing on our end too, because one of the things that will make this system work better is to just have it be easier to navigate, both for residents and for employers and for our staff and our enforcement officers. So that's another thing we'll be trying out. And if you do live in one of the neighborhoods and do get sucked into this pilot program, we hope that you'll give us feedback on what that experience is like from the user perspective using these new modern permits. Okay, so with that, I'd like to open it up. If there's anybody who'd like to speak, I'd ask that you come to the mic. We have something blowing up in the sky, so if you can speak with your inside-outside voice so everybody can hear you, that would be great. State your name, your address, and if you can keep your comments to 3 minutes, that would be appreciated, because I think there's quite a few people who'd like to speak.
Okay, I will try to talk fast. Is that?
Talk loud also.
Okay, loud and fast. Eve Niedergang, thank you very much for bringing up the topic of somebody who has to come regularly. I have the situation of have guitar students, sometimes one per hour for, quite a few hours often during the day. And so your idea of the permits, but it's only license plates, would I have to give all my students' license plates to you guys or something? That would be a problem. You haven't heard too much in the way of complaints from 51 Hawthorne Avenue, Princeton, New Jersey, right across from the Choir College, because we solved the problem some years ago by getting a permit for residential permits only, and that saved my life, because before that, I'm on the corner. So just so that you know that other people are probably in situations like this, I'm right on the corner with a no parking from here to corner sign, pretty much 2/3 or 3/4 of the way along our property. So we got one place that sort of abuts the next door neighbor, and then one place in front of their house, and then there's their driveway and another driveway, and so it was a problem, because being at 51 Hawthorne Avenue, I was absolutely nearer the Choir College than the Choir College parking lot was. So this was the go-to spot for anybody who wanted to park and go to the Choir College, or sometimes the high school. So we would always have the one place in front of our house filled up with a car by, 7:30 in the morning, and they'd be there, most of the day and probably into the evening, and who knows. And so it was almost impossible for any of us to park in front of our own house. Or my husband, who has heavy equipment that he's unloading and loading into cars, he does film shows, 16 millimeter. So that's, he's carrying his projectors, trying, halfway down the block and stuff. Our driveway is in back of our house. So it's all up, downstairs and through all sorts of, vegetation and stuff. So, you're not going to be able to carry it all that way. So we had a serious problem with nobody being able to park anywhere, and my students didn't know what they were marked. They would say, oh, I had to walk, 3 blocks with my guitar and my music and everything. It was a big problem. So we got residential parking, and please don't take it away from us. But anyway, other people probably have that sort of thing too. And anyone who's giving guitar lessons, or maybe they're a tailor, or maybe they're doing some work at home and they have people coming as clients, that's a factor too. So please bear all that in mind. I'm very glad that you're thinking this through so carefully, and I appreciate that.
Thank
But
you.
anyway, we had problems.
Is this microphone working? Or?
Yeah, but you have to give it your all to be
I'll
heard.
speak a bit louder. Tony Lunn. I live on Hawthorne Avenue, same street as my neighbor here, Alice. We are on a street named after a tree, but I don't think we are technically part of the tree streets. Nevertheless, thank you very much for your work on this difficult area. I know it's hard. This is, as far as I know, the first public exposure of what you've been up to for 7 months, 8 months. And I have to say I'm a little confused at the moment. And I hope that when you do write a report, that you start the report by saying what you feel the problems are. Define your problems carefully. Do not assume that everybody has the same problem. There are lots of different problems. You may be talking across purposes. Explore creative solutions. The first slide was a proposal with streets and green lines on it. I know you're short of time this evening, but that's a bit putting the cart before the horse. We do need to know in the due course of time how you came to these conclusions and what different considerations you looked at. So please do fill all that out in the future. And another thing that I'd like to see is when you propose a solution, do say, well, okay, this will improve this problem, but it will worsen that problem. Look at the balance of the whole thing. Obviously, none of your pollutions are going to be perfect, but do look at the pros and cons of what you're doing. I have a sense that there's a tendency to rush to a solution, but the creative alternatives we want to hear about. Perhaps you've talked about them in the task force, perhaps not. Somebody's talked about private parking lots, okay? Well, let me throw out a couple more. Due to the efforts of a long ago mayor, we are the proud users of a free bee bus service in this town, which I think is significantly underutilized. And I wonder whether it could be brought in to assist this kind of thing, particularly at bringing in people from more outlying regions. And I'll leave you with one other thought. You're already looking at neighborhoods that are close to the downtown, but it does occur to me that there are other neighborhoods close to the downtown. What you want is areas with fairly wide streets. You don't want to try to cram parking in onto narrow streets like John's Witherspoon. There's an area that's quite suitable in this regard, and it's on the western side of Route 206. And it has quite a lot of rather wide streets that don't have much parking on them at the moment. So consider the western section as a part of your examinations. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Kathleen Carroll. I live at 167 John Street. So 3 things. My block of John Street has 9 housing units with no driveway, and another house that has a fire hydrant in front of it. So just take that into consideration. Also, in your report for the John Witherspoon area, the old borough, you said something about visitor parking permits, which I have never heard before. So if that has been available to residents, it was completely unknown to me, but I'm glad to hear that it exists. It needs to be advertised better. And the contractor parking, You said that the contractors can only park for 2 hours, but my understanding is that contractors can park all day if they need to, because otherwise they couldn't get their work done.
In what I explained, but currently where there's a 2-hour limit, so even in the where there's permit parking, like in the high school zone, they wouldn't be receive a citation if contractors are parking there. But as far as what the time limitations are, I'm not sure at what point they would be enforced.
Good evening. This really can't hear. Bernadine Hines. I live on John Street. I'd just like to offer some suggestions. Actually, it's a follow-up. The gentleman was up here previously. We're thinking on the same wavelength. There are places in Princeton, Community Park North, the shopping center, Franklin Street, across from where the hospital used to be. There's a lot. And I'm just wondering why, for employee parking, those places couldn't be used, and you use the shuttle bus that comes around periodically and shuttles people back and forth uptown to where they have to, to go to work. That's a lot of unused space.
I think my colleagues on the task force can attest that we have discussed that.
So, all right, so that's some possible.
It's an available option.
Some possible options. So
yeah, it's available right now as those who would park there. But as far as for a permit parking system, we've discussed different options where employees might be able, what options we would offer.
I'll answer a different way. So,
Yeah.
I mean, so a couple of the things you mentioned are people don't need a permit right now. They can just do it for free. So we don't want to make it more restrictive to use those opportunities. The one area you mentioned where there are restrictions is Franklin. The Franklin lot right now has restrictions on it.
Okay.
And that is slated for building.
I see.
So we want to be careful about putting in any sort of long-term solution there. But we are looking at the street parking there that you heard Ms. Fraga talk about earlier with since it seems to be underutilized, the kiosk spots on Franklin to maybe mix in some employee permits there.
Okay, but again, I would suggest that you really seriously look into the shopping center, Community Park, and Community Park North for employees to park there and have them shuttled up through with the shuttle B bus.
Good evening, Ben Westrick, Maple Street. Ben Westrick on
You have
Maple
to
Street.
speak really
here we go.
loud.
Yep. Sorry, go. So I live in a duplex and I share a driveway, which results in ultimately me moving the car often in the morning and just leaving it on the street all day long and stealing somebody else's parking spot.
You got it. Look at us, but talk really loud with your mouth really close to the mic.
Name and address also, right?
So I live on Maple Street and I share a driveway. The result is that I ultimately every morning pull out my car and just occupy a spot which could be used by somebody else despite me having a driveway, because otherwise my neighbor and I always have to go back and forth. I could expand my driveway in order to fit 2 cars. So I wonder if the township would, in parallel with the changes proposed potentially, be somewhat flexible and creative into allowing some alternative solutions to modify somebody's driveway to allow additional parking spots, as I've seen being done on Madison and some other streets in town.
Yeah, that's a controversial proposal that's sort of outside the scope of our conversation this evening, but we hear your point.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gilbert Collins. I live at 155 John Street. And I, first of all, also want to thank you for your work on this issue. I know there are a lot of interest involved, and it's a very complicated issue. I just wanted to give some perspectives from where I live in Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood as well. So one of my fears with the proposal is that on a street like John Street, which is a very long street in Witherspoon Jackson, if you're assigning parking by street, the parking is going to congregate at the top end of the street. So for people who live at the bottom end toward Community Park, they will likely see little impact if only X spots are assigned to John Street. And so really for that kind of street like that, and perhaps others, you need to look at by block on a street and not just on a street overall, because it is going to congregate. And houses like mine, which are toward the top end, are going to see a lot of parking. Another couple questions just that I'm curious about are, do you have an idea if the new parking regime would be just weekday only, weekdays plus Saturday, every day of the week? Because there could be disparate impacts there too. Already parking is more tight on weekends, particularly Saturdays. I know right now, Sundays, there's open parking. But on Saturdays, it's still a lot tighter. And I'm just curious if employers are going to be given the option to park on Saturdays as well. Another question I have is, do you have a vision for how frequently you expect there to be enforcement of the new regime if it were in a pilot phase, to make sure that the employees are only parking as many cars as their employers allow them to, or if they're just saying, look, if I get one $50 ticket a month, that's fine with me. I'm fine living with that.
That's correct.
Yeah, so those are excellent questions. I think in terms of the enforcement, given it's a pretty short-term pilot, I think there'd be significant enforcement in part because we're trying to collect information, like I said before, on the technology. So we want to get a good sense of how the license plate readers work. So yeah, it would not be a good time to be abusing the system. And you know, I think we'll see, but we haven't gotten to that level of detail yet in terms of how frequently, and we probably won't say publicly either how frequently the enforcement officers will be circulating.
Okay.
Right, but I'll just comment, it's going to be multiple times per day, because if there's a 2-hour grace period, there's no way to enforce that. I mean, maybe they're not going to come every 2 hours, but it's got to be multiple times per day.
Okay. The final thing I'd say is I would definitely and enthusiastically second to the notion of looking for other parking options that are currently available. For example, the tennis courts by Community Park and other places, shopping center, and shuttling people to Central Town. I think that's a wonderful idea. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Marty Schneiderman. I live at 47 Murray Place in Princeton, and that's the street between the two gas stations that heads over towards Prospect Avenue. A couple of things. Our street many years ago had a particular problem, and that was that there was no limit for the number of hours that you could park there. And in fact, what we discovered was a very large number of people from Princeton University, students, were parking on the street because they were losing the parking that was provided in the engineering quadrangle behind us as that expanded. We met with the university and we looked at the number of cars that were parking there, and many of them had university decals. The university was very helpful at the time. They put signs on there saying, excuse me, you're not really supposed to be parking on the streets. We provided you parking, but it didn't work because it wasn't convenient for them access-wise. The solution, and it was a very good solution, was a 2-hour parking as you've described. And as the gentleman just before me mentioned, there were differences. Parts of the street, that applies Monday to Friday, and other parts of Murray Place, it's Monday through Saturday. And just as the gentleman had said, the area closest to Nassau Street would get filled up more frequently in that particular respect. But as all of this is contemplated, there are a couple of things that are very important to also anticipate and take into account and think about. Because the solution then was not that the university could do something. It had to be the enforcement of that 2-hour limit. And when the police officers came in regularly with ticket cards, it really made a big difference and it worked very nicely. But 10 days ago at the planning board meeting here, the university did a very nice job of providing their plan of what they're going to be doing in the next year or so between Murray Place and down at Faculty Road. As you know, there's a plan to build a very large parking garage there that would replace 4 parking lots that are right now along Western Way. And the buildings that are there, Ferris Thompson Apartments, will be replaced with university facilities as well. What does that mean? That means that more people at the university that now are parking closer to campus and the engineering quadrangle won't be able to do that. They're going to have to be down at Faculty Road. Equals more of a demand and want to park on local streets closer to where things are. So I think back to the last point that was made, a very important point, this question of enforcement. Right now the enforcement's pretty easy. There's no scanning of licenses or anything like that. The police car comes along, they can chalk the tires, see where it is. If somebody's there more than 2 hours, they get a ticket, and it works very well. So in anything that you're doing, please look at what has worked in the past and why and how that was established. What were the lessons we learned along the way? What worked and didn't work and why? And please take that into account as things move forward. Because we do appreciate that this is a very big challenge for council and the committee. This isn't easy. We appreciate that, and we thank you very much for asking good questions and moving forward this in a very productive way. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd just like to comment that the enforcement software for the 2-hour parking is actually called, digital chalking. So they're very tuned in to the way that 2-hour limits have been enforced in the past, and they're just using license plate readers, which I think make it even easier because the enforcement officer doesn't even have to get out of their vehicle to chalk the tires. So.
Right. But then they have to get out to give the ticket, of course. Sure.
Yeah.
But you can't get around that. Got it.
Right.
One last point that was brought up before, and that has to do with snow. The current arrangements where cars on our street, there's only one home that doesn't have its own driveway. That person pays the fee for the parking permit to be on the street overnight. But as you know, that does not apply if there's snow on the street to make that happen. On some of the streets where I hear 4, or on Witherspoon Street, off of there on some of those other streets where there are none, it means that when there's heavy snow, those cars can't park there overnight. So the question is going to be, and it's an important question, where do those cars go under those circumstances? Because there'll be more of them under the plan that you're talking about here. This year, we haven't seen much snow, but other years, it's been very different. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor, I just wanted
sorry.
to throw in, a couple of people have made comments about shuttle bus service, and I just want to comment a little bit on that. We do have our freebie. The freebie, although it got off to a slow start, is now running often at capacity. Its route is a 70-minute loop. So it might happen that you could park at the shopping center and hop on the freebie, and that might work for you. But the chances are pretty highly against it. And while we would love to expand public transit in town right now, that's a financing issue. So unless manna falls from heaven, grants get accepted, right now, that I don't think that's a viable option. To put him on the spot, Dozier Hammond, the head of our public transit committee, is here, and I don't know, Dozier, if you have anything to add to that, to the idea of using the freebie. Yeah, it's a great idea, but at this point, with our resources, it's unfortunately not practical. So, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Millett, and I reside at 258 John Street. Let me echo others' comments of thanking you and the committee for the work you've done. My property has half a driveway, which I co-share with a neighbor who just thinks we should park on the street. My property is right by the enviable corner of being at Lee and John, so everybody wants to park there so they can go to dinner. I would just ask the committee to think about the 24-hour movement piece, because that means that we have to go out every 24 hours and move our cars like on the weekend. No?
That's not the intention. The 24-hour that's mentioned is intended to convey that you can park during the day as well as at night.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, then that wasn't clear, because I was very concerned about that. And then I don't know if later on you'll be able to tell us more about how you will provide information about a guest permit. When I tried to use it a year or so ago, it was very complicated, and certainly didn't allow for people who were going to pick up a rental at the airport and come in at like 10 o'clock at night. So I don't know what the current thinking is on that, but to make it also so that it's not burdensome. I'd like to be in compliance, but I think we also have to weigh the burden, and maybe there's also online things we can do.
I was going to say, I think what we're envisioning is that the resident would be able to apply online. So even though when the municipal office is closed, it would still be possible. Would be able to apply online.
Great. And then I would just like to echo the comments too about the snow removal when that does happen. I know I try to go down to the end of the street on the sides because they said if they could come down, John, and just clear it, that would be great. And then we can move our cars back. So I think snow removal plans will be important to understand too as you continue, so that we make sure that these streets are usable afterwards and not creating a big burden for the residents and then for the guests who come into our neighborhood. So thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Robert Hebditch. You can hear that okay? And I live on Hickory Court, which is another one of those tree streets that supposedly isn't a tree street. I wasn't planning to say anything today. I didn't even know that there was such a thing as a parking committee of any kind. That's my ignorance, not a complaint. And I heard about it only through reading in the local newspaper, a note from Phyllis Teitelbaum. What I wanted to do was piggyback off what Tony said, which is, this is very nice, but to be frank, it doesn't really directly affect me as far as I can see. You're talking about an area that I live further away. My tree street is way up Walnut. But I wanted to say that the holistic approach to the parking problem needs to be addressed. There are a lot more parking problems besides people who don't want to walk to work or are unable to walk to work. The high school, when we first came here 20 years ago, parking wasn't any kind of a problem. In 2007, I think it was, there was a complete restructuring of the high school. They added a huge auditorium and I forget what the other thing was, but another thing that means a lot of people come. Oh, the swimming pool at Witherspoon. What that results in is usage other than by residents. It results in this auditorium in the high school is 700 seats. When there's something on there, parking is backed all the way up. The parking signs are completely ignored, and understandably, the police ignore it. They don't give out tickets, but there's parking all the way up Walnut. There's parking so bad that just a couple of weeks ago, there was an event on at Witherspoon and another event on at the high school. All of the streets around were completely parked, and Ewing, the street that supposedly doesn't have a lot of traffic on it, was completely impassable because of people parking on both sides. That, I think, is an issue that needs to get addressed. I realize it doesn't come under your purview, but I wanted to say the whole parking thing needs to be looked at, and the high school and the Board of Ed, in company with the council, need to start addressing providing a parking building of some sort or a parking lot of some sort that will accommodate all the cars that come in, not just from students, but from all these other dues that go on that are private. And I think they earn money. I don't know, maybe you can tell me that. They probably earn money for the council, which is great. But the parking needs to be addressed. Thank you so much.
And I'd just like to comment that as we introduced the program this evening, we said we were trying to solve problems for neighborhoods where we get a lot of complaints. So thank you for your complaint. It will give us some urgency in addressing the needs in your neighborhood as well, which is part of our purview. We just were not addressing it first. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Peter Falvey. I live at Harriet Bryant on Elm Road. And I was thinking regarding the freebie, it would seem it might be a good idea if we started charging a fare on the freebie, like $1 a ride. Because now you find that there are people on the freebie that just stay on the freebie for numerous trips. And it's almost like a homeless. I mean, it's like a shelter for some people. And, that might be a way of financing the freebie service. I mean, if you started charging, say $1 a ride to start off with. But
can I just respond to that, that particular point? That is something that has been discussed. The thing is the expense of installing something that's going to take money is actually so much more. I mean, you would have to charge so much to cover the expense of that. It just is not practical. But it's not a suggestion we haven't considered. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Aaron Pickett, and I live at 130 Spruce Street, so right where Spruce and Linden meet. Thank you for all your work. I totally appreciate it. I love the apartment. I'm a renter there. I love the apartment I live in, and I love being able to be so close to everything in Princeton. But we only have one parking spot, and my girlfriend and I, unfortunately, are some of the two working families that you sort of talked about, and we both work outside of Princeton. So the only reason we're able to sort of live where we do is because we rent another parking spot from our landlord off on Aiken and Princeton Avenue. So it's about like a 10-minute walk for me every morning to get to my car. So I would love, I promise, we're gone all day during the day, so plenty of parking spots for people who need to work, but the idea of having an overnight parking spot next to our apartment would be fantastic, and it'd make it so that if that parking spot ever did disappear, that we're, again, renting from our landlord, we wouldn't have to find a new apartment to live in. So thanks so much for your plan. Hopefully it goes forward, and I just want to say I love that part about it. So thank you. Thanks.
Hello, Jack Morrison. I'm a proud member of the task force. And as the president of the Merchants Association and a business owner in the Tree Streets, it was my understanding, I think Liz sort of gave me the nod to get involved with this after the less than spectacular rollout of the meters and the parking fees in 18. And the conversation to complete that whole initiative downtown was to get the employees out of Central Business District and find them satellite parking throughout the community. As you know, we've taken sort of a circuitous route to get there, and it was decided a few weeks ago we knew John Witherspoon because of the history of township and borough had two different sets of rules, so that was very apparent that needed to be looked at. And about 3 weeks ago, Liz looked at me and said, we're going to do the Tree Street. So we have a lot of, as you can see just from that testimony, we have a lot of data to collect. And I urge council, and I'll do that later on, the data is important. We need to have a plan that's going to work rather than what we hope would work. The reality, I was talking to Marty the other day in the gym, the reality, just looking at the Tree Streets, our customer traffic and employees, there's less businesses, there's less employees, there's less stores, there's less everything down there. We have, since the heyday of Davidson's supermarket, we're down probably literally 50,000 customers a year. And with the recent closure of that, where Wild Oats was, in 14, we've experienced 15,000 customers less over just the past 4 or 5 years. So this, while I think it's good, I heard a lot of encouraging things tonight. We have to look at this locally and globally. I also think, David and Letitia, I would recommend that we get a how much committee going pretty quick, because we saw the software, we heard some of the prices. I've heard we're going to have a lot of constant monitoring. That means I've heard 2 or 3 more little wagons and 2 or 3 more employees and software and all that. So I want to make the statement for the merchants that we can't bear the entire cost of this thing. It's not, we're a major taxpayer in this community. The neighborhood is 60 million. We pump in another 20 in local payrolls, and we don't send a kid to school. We don't get our street, we don't ask for anything. We send you a check. So it's important to the health of the community that we look at the costs of this thing. And this doesn't, and you're taking something that's been free for people since 1920 and changing it. And so we just have to move cautiously. As the sergeant told us in the meeting, take our time. Look for intended consequences and unintended consequences, because pilots, even though we call it a pilot, it'll be damn near impossible to take anything back. So let's just take our time and do, but I'm encouraged by tonight. Thank you.
Hi, this is really weird.
Someone who knows how to use the mic is awesome.
I always have a loud voice. I'm Jenny Krummiller, 187 Library Place, and I'm actually talking way more globally than almost anybody here, because I'm concerned about I think Tony Lunn alluded to, that I think we should define the problem that we're trying to solve and talk about the assumptions that we're making before we institute any changes, and make sure that we're doing the right thing. And what I'm mostly concerned about is adding more parking, and that this pilot project's a small part of it, but it is adding more parking by allowing overnight parking where there wasn't overnight parking, and so that's the same as adding parking spaces. Although Princeton real estate is very expensive, apartments and homes with little or no parking cost less. The taxes on those properties are less. I hope this point will not be underestimated by the council. Real estate costs are very high in the downtown, whether for parking or for housing. Those who opt to buy or rent homes with limited parking made the decision to live with the constraints, possibly because of the lower price. If those residents can't live with the limited parking and can't find, and they're not driving, walking to work or taking the bus, or they can't find paid parking, they move out, and new residents who can live within the constricted parking spaces take their place. This is how it's always worked. This discount for no car or one car households should be called a progressive parking program for promoting sustainability and walkability. In fact, Princeton has a higher than average number of residents who commute to work by walking, according to the census. A significant number of households that live closest to Princeton University and other downtown employers currently live with 1 or 0 cars without having to pay the added cost for parking that they don't use. In my opinion, and that of other proponents of progressive parking theory, this is as it should be. It is understandable and predictable that individuals with limited parking want additional low-cost parking for their private use, as anyone who would stand to gain a new valuable asset would. In fact, the vast majority of people taking part in the public discussions we have had about parking want more parking. The other point I would like to highlight is that some council members may not be aware that the Nelson-Nygaard parking study is about optimizing parking only. The detrimental effects of new additional parking on the municipality in terms of traffic, the environment, housing costs, or quality of life were not included in the report. By contrast, I hope the council will consider these important issues before making policy changes. I understand there is pressure to add parking and sympathy for those who want more parking, but the downside to adding more parking, filling in all the empty spaces in the streets with cars, is going in the opposite direction of where we want to go in terms of walkability, affordability, and sustainability. Thanks.
Hi, Liz. Rich Stiglick. I'm on 41 Maple Street. I want to applaud the council for their work. And you and I, Liz, had met 6 years ago to review the quality of life issue for the lack of parking for residents that don't have a driveway. And it's not that you're blocked off for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours. It's almost from 6:30 in the morning to 7 o'clock at night. Even though you do pay for a parking pass, a parking permit to let you park there at night. So I applaud the relief that would give to probably 7 or 8 spaces, whereas today, where I looked down the street, there were 34 non-residents that park for free. And even though I do pay taxes and I do pay for a permit for nighttime parking, there's no relief. And my heart goes out to the residents without a driveway that have handicaps, that are ill, that need to park far away. So I think the solution that you're providing really addresses the quality of life and has a heart for those residents. So thank you very much.
Hi, Kate Carroll again from John Street. I want to respond to Jenny's remarks. Even if you commute on foot, it's very difficult to live in New Jersey without a car. So that means you need a place to park the car when you're walking, leaving for work in the morning. The car has to stay somewhere. Also, Princeton doesn't require homeowners to disclose parking rules when they sell a house. So I was misled when I bought my house and told that I could purchase, not for free, but that I could buy a permit to park on the street. And I got quite a shock when I started getting tickets during the day because that permit wasn't good during the day. So disclosure is important.
I'm going to ask you to be the last comment for tonight, and we're going to be going out into the neighborhoods. Okay. And then, it's all right, Stephanie, you want to be last? You can be last. So we'll have 3 more comments because we have other things on our agenda, and we're going to be going out into the neighborhoods too. So this will not be your last opportunity, but go ahead.
Well, I was going to refrain from speaking this evening, but I couldn't just let Jenny's comment go. My name is Christina Corvin. I live on Lee Avenue, and I'm grateful that she's not on the parking committee anymore because I don't understand what the problem of a resident who does not have a driveway to park overnight. We are also taxpayers. Okay, we might not pay $30,000 for those of us who can't afford to live on Library Place, but my taxes are $10,000. And so it's not cheap to live here. And I don't see what the problem is of us parking overnight. That's all I have to say. Yes, thank you.
Thank you for the good work that you're doing. My name is Hendrix Davis. I live at 232 John Street. Thank you finally for coming around to this, as I've been coming to council meetings for the past probably 10 years, talking about the harmonization of parking in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, which includes parking of employees on the residential streets, the mainly residential streets. So my question is actually a caution for you to really look very carefully about the selling of a public resource to a private entity, a private business, in effect by offering to give businesses permits for their employees. You're basically selling a public resource, right? Parking, which I pay taxes for. Okay, so I have questions about that. You know, maybe you've seen this done in other municipalities, but I would want to challenge that, really. Certainly we want to support the businesses in every way that we can, but I'm not so sure that we should be in the business of actually selling a public resource to them. So, you know, what's the quid pro quo there? What do we get out of it?
I'd just like to remind you, Hendricks, that businesses pay taxes too.
They do pay taxes, but their employees currently are parking on Lytle Street free, and on, I don't know so much about McLean, but probably Green Street and maybe Quarry too, during the day without interruption. Even though some of those streets, not all of them, have 2-hour limits.
That's very much what
the police do not come around frequently on those streets. They definitely come down John Street, because on the couple of occasions that I've forgotten to move my car, I've gotten a ticket. And I do have a driveway, so, but I think, you know, really be clear that this is what you want to be getting into, because there could be other, you know, consequences that flow from this across the town. So think about it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie Shorney, Ray Street. I think one of the reasons this is such a difficult discussion is because we're not considering public transport. I know it's not in the purview of this current committee, but I don't think it's necessarily about money as much as about will to make it happen. I think that we can make it happen if we want to make it happen. I think 4 sources of money that I can say right up front would be coming from the leaf and brush collection, moving the money there, a single-use bag fee, the university, and meters in the western section. Thanks.
Okay, we'll let that be the last comment for now. And there, I do want to direct people to the municipal website, which is princetonnj.gov. So we'll be, there's, if you scroll down the front page, there's a section on initiatives, and one of them is parking, and there'll be information there about the neighborhood meetings. Hopefully most of you are on, if you're either in Witherspoon-Jackson or in the Tree Streets or in the Murray Place neighborhood, that you're part of one of those neighborhood listservs, and we'll make sure that we're contacting the owners of those listservs to help get the word out about the upcoming neighborhood meetings. And also, there's a weekly newsletter that I send out every week, and if you're interested in keeping up to date on this issue and other issues, you can sign up on the municipal website to get those emails, and that's at princetonnj.gov. So I'm going to wait a minute if you're here just for the parking, so you can go if you want to, but you're welcome to stay because there's other really important items on the agenda, which you're welcome to stay for as well. This is for, oh no, I still need this. Okay. Okay. We have council reports. So I'll start on my right with Ms. Pearl-Lambros. Any reports?
No
for this
reports.
evening? Any reports, Ms. Niedergang?
I think my PEC, my Environmental Commission announcement before was really a report, so I'd like to correct that for the record.
Any reports?
No reports.
Any reports? No. Mr. Williamson, any reports? Okay. Are there any staff reports? Nope. Okay. Then we'll move on to our public hearings for this evening. The first public hearing is for ordinance 2020-1, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton creating the position of permanent paid firefighter in the Princeton Fire Department and amending the code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. Is there anybody who'd like to speak to it? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing.
I think you have one.
Oh, sorry, Kip.
Kip Cherry, 24 Dempsey. I want to start by saying that I am not opposed to full-time firefighters, but at the same time, I think we should also consider other creative solutions. One such alternative may be anticipated a bit by the ordinance in terms of a part-time firefighter. Before I go any further, I want to thank all of the volunteers who have over the years, especially those from the Italian-American community, who have been, I think, much of the heart of our volunteer firefighters from my observation. And I'm very glad to see, too, that we have two new volunteers coming aboard later in the agenda. But what I'm thinking about is a stipend that would augment the pay that firefighters get from their regular jobs and create an incentive for volunteers to be volunteers. This concept would be something like our own council members and mayor, who essentially are volunteers, but receive what could be called a stipend. This isn't to say that professional firefighters don't bring special training, particularly in handling hazardous materials, but I fear that some volunteers may not feel so appreciated in a department that is looking for full-time salaried firefighters. I also note that both Forrestal and the City of Trenton have highly trained and certified professional multidisciplined firefighters who can be called in on an emergency, and I note that Forrestal, in fact, sometimes is the first to arrive at a Princeton fire. So I'm not opposing the ordinance, but offering this as another alternative for your consideration, because if we end up with all full-time professional firefighters, I fear that there will be an economic burden for the town, which will require a raise in taxes and squeeze out families further that are struggling to stay in Princeton, many of them from minority and ethnic groups. I also would like to see the town reach out further, which I am sure you're trying to do already, but further to other racial and ethnic groups and excite them about becoming volunteer firefighters. I think that a stipend might go a long way towards making it financially feasible for some people to stay in Princeton who might otherwise leave. Others who have left may in fact be encouraged to return. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. And just so you know, we do have a per diem program in place, and you'll see when we get to the goals, one of our goals is to ensure that we're doing a full volunteer recruitment effort for the fire department, and that's certainly a message we want to send, because we so are appreciative of all of our volunteers, but especially volunteers with the fire department and with PFARs. They're invaluable. They provide a valuable resource to the town, and the intention of this is not to move to a fully paid department. The intention is to have what's called a combo department, and we have the paid firefighters there to help support the volunteers and to make sure that the volunteers have the resources that they need to continue and to have a successful department. So that's our intention, but your comments are well taken, so thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of the public hearing? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing and I'll bring it back to council. Is there a motion to approve?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve. And before I do that, I just want to thank Kip. I'll be reaching out to talk with you more about recruiting more volunteers in that per diem program. But I would like to make a motion very heartily to approve this.
Great, thanks, Michelle.
I'll second.
So it's been moved by Ms. Perron-Lambros, seconded by Ms. Fraga. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perron-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes. The ordinance passes unanimously. Next is ordinance 2020-2, an ordinance of the Municipal Council of the Municipality of Princeton in Mercer County, authorizing a lease with the Friends of Herrontown Woods pertaining to a portion of Herrontown Woods, also known as the Veblen property, part of Block 3001, Lot 7, and Block 2901, Lot 1 in the Municipality of Princeton. And I'd like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance. Is there anybody who'd like to speak to it? Mr. Hiltner.
Thank you. Hi. I think it's 12 years ago that I came upon the house, the Veblen House and Cottage out in Arrowtown Woods when I was doing a plant inventory out there. And I thought, wow, what are these? And so I'll read through this. Why not? I wrote it. And I'm just really happy to be here at this juncture. I'd like to express gratitude to David and Mark and Lucille for the work they put in to develop the lease over the past year. It was a pleasure to work with you all, and I look forward to more interactions as we move forward. I also want to thank all the supporters on council and in the community, the angel donors, and other contributors who have stepped forward and have shown a belief in us and our work. The board members and all the other volunteers with the Friends of Harrontown Woods who have helped us reach this point where our nonprofit can at last have a formalized arrangement for repairing and utilizing the Veblen House and Cottage for the public benefit. We are a small organization formed 7 years ago. I like to think of us as the little engine that could, because we stepped into a void that no local institution, government, or existing nonprofit was willing to fill. Back in 2013, Harrontown Woods, Princeton's first nature preserve, donated by the Veblens 55 years earlier, had been abandoned. The nature trails were impassable, the buildings boarded up and overgrown. Into that void stepped a few of us volunteers, in particular Kurt and Sally Tazalar, who made the trails passable once again. Now the buildings that the Veblens donated, along with the land, await our focused attention. Some people may say that may ask what the value is of a couple old houses in the woods. How could they possibly be useful for the community? The Veblen House has been boarded up for 22 years, the cottage for 60. We sometimes think of buildings as contrary to the goal of open space, but in fact, they can be complementary. Where do people who love open space gather? Think of Clark House at Battlefield, Mountain Lakes House at the Mountain Lakes, Johnson Education Center at Greenway Meadows, and the Updike Farmstead. All of these examples are actually on the west side of Princeton. On the east side of Princeton, it's a different story. We have like 500 acres of preserved land on the east side of Princeton, but no building to go along with it, to complement it. That is what the Veblens were trying to provide when they donated the building so long ago, and that vision is what the Friends of Harrontown Woods now wants to realize. I like to think of the Veblen House and Cottage as two riddles that have sat quietly in Harrontown Woods all this time, waiting to be solved. They have so many stories to tell as we research the history of the houses, the people who lived in them, and the eras they were built in. They're becoming like a magic school bus that can take us sailing back to distant times and forgotten worlds. They are our windows into the past and can teach lessons that will carry us into the future. As we maintain trails and repair the buildings the Veblens left behind, we see ourselves as setting the stage at Harrontown Woods for exploring nature and history, for learning and artistic endeavors, for social events, or for solitude and quiet contemplation. In 2017, Princeton Council stepped up and helped us save the buildings from demolition. And we thank you for your support now as we begin finally to put these buildings on the positive trajectory they have patiently awaited and so very much deserve. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, I just wanted to introduce ourselves. We are members of the Friends of Harrontown Woods. My name is Inga Reagan.
My name is Pallavi Nuka.
And we thank you so much for your support and your interest in this project moving forward. We are really trying to work to create a there, a place that in these modern times people will want to get off their phones, come out and spend some time, get their green hour, perhaps spend some time doing Tai Chi, yoga. We're going to try to create a place that people will really enjoy and make use of the words and learn something and learn to become stewards of their local environment. And we thank you.
And I'd also like to give a shout out to Councilman David Cohen and Town Administrator Mark Daschel for all their help over the last year negotiating the lease and getting this together. And it's wonderful to see this on the agenda today, and I promise we will have plenty of parking for everyone.
Thank you.
Hi. My name's Andrew Thornton. I've been a longtime resident, having grown up here in Princeton. And one of the very first things that I and my sister used to do every Sunday afternoon, our parents would take us out to Herrontown Woods. And my one request every time is that we have to take the longest route, the biggest circle, so that we could spend as much time as possible out in those woods. Now, I moved away from Princeton about when I was 18, off to college, ended up in Maine for 15 years, and spent a lot of time in Maine working in naturalist, building nature trails, anything along those lines. And when I came back to Princeton a number of years ago, I was really missing the outdoors factor. Maine has plenty, and fortunately, Princeton has plenty. And I spent that time immediately volunteering with every group around this area I could find. The mountain lakes, you name it, Marquand Park. If all these places I grew up and knew all the little nooks and crannies of this place. And I find it amazing now, here 55 years later, what am I doing? I'm spending most days out in the Veblen Park or Veblen House and out in Herrontown Woods. I spent 3 hours out there this morning working on a botanical garden. So it's amazing that a place like that has come full circle in my life. And I never thought I would be back here. I never thought I would be back in Herrontown Woods. But this whole love of the outdoors and nature that started in this place has come full circle. And I think that the fact that you guys have really helped make this possible, particularly Steve and Kurt, who really had this vision, but that the really wonderful group of people that are beginning to form around this community, the new community around this house and property are really special. And I'll say one last thing. I am really amazed in the time I spend out there at the number of people that I meet. It's incredible the folks that come through that place and use it for all sorts of different things. I'm amazed at the number of people who don't go out in the woods, who stay in the parking lot and seem to get some quality time, lunch, whatever. Other people who will wander through. I have met so many interesting people there. And I really think that that is oftentimes maybe one of the greatest opportunities or resources that a place like Herrontown Woods and Veblen House can offer, is that real sense of community for all these people, who are going through here. It's amazing. But anyway, thank you very much, and I hope this vote goes well.
We do too. Thank you.
Kip Cherry, 24 Dempsey. Being a history buff as I am, I feel that we shouldn't forget who Veblen was, and I just wanted to comment on that. Just a few words about Oswald Veblen and his vital importance to the world. During his career here in Princeton, Veblen made important contributions in topology, the properties of a geometric object that are preserved under continuous changes in shape, a key to what is known as modern physics. This differential geometry is used to define space and time, which is essential for positioning satellites in orbit around the Earth and for studying black holes. After his death in 1960, the American Mathematical Society created an award in his name called the Oswald Veblen Prize in Geometry. It is awarded every 3 years, and it is the most prestigious award in recognition of outstanding research in geometry. Veblen taught mathematics at Princeton University from 1905 to 1932, when he had a key role in organizing the Institute for Advanced Study, resigned his professorship at the university, and became the first professor at the institute that same year. During his years in Princeton, Veblen and his wife Elizabeth accumulated land along Princeton Ridge. In 1957, they donated 82 acres to establish the Herringtown Woods Arboretum. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Clifford Zink. I live on Aiken Avenue, and I'd like to congratulate Steve, who I've known for many years, and Andy and all the wonderful people that have worked with him. And really, they saw this wonderful natural and historic gem when it was really being tremendously neglected. And the thousands of hours that volunteers have put in to make the place usable for the citizens. And we've heard people tonight talk about, you know, what's so wonderful about nature, which is you kind of recreate yourself and, you know, connect ourselves with so many things that are so much more important than parking, and at least, you know, in the woods. And so I also want to congratulate council for taking this on your shoulders as well. You're willing to step up and take a risk. There is a risk involved, but you're willing to say, these people have worked very, very hard, and they've demonstrated perseverance. They've shown themselves to be tenacious. And I think once this gets going, more and more people will come on board. And it's not hard to walk around there and imagine, you know, a small electric bus dropping off a bunch of school children, and the teacher being there and walking through the woods, and the wonderful little Veblen house being a little environmental center, you know, the first facility in that eastern part of Princeton. That would be really wonderful, and it wouldn't be too far off in the future that we could all appreciate that. So I would recommend that you follow through and adopt this ordinance, and then you know, we'll all hopefully be able to help Steve and the other people bring his vision and theirs to reality. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's somebody else that would like to speak, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to council. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
So it's been moved by Mr. Cohen, seconded by Mr. Williamson. Any further comments from council? Yeah, Mr. Cohen?
I just want to say congratulations, and I just forwarded you an email about a grant opportunity from NJDEP and Green Acres, which can be used for facilities which will support environmental education. So let's talk about whether there's a way we can help you follow up on that.
Great. All right. Any other further comments?
I just want to say I'm really so grateful to all of you and to Peter, you know, and Inga and Margaret and all the people that weren't mentioned. This is such a gift to Princeton, and for those of us who grew up here, Herringtown Woods has we feel a particular connection to it, and you've brought it back to us, and thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be voting on this tonight, finally, so congratulations.
All right. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perrone-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
The ordinance passes unanimously. Congratulations. All right, next is ordinance 2020-3, amended salary ordinance of the Mayor and Council of Princeton concerning salaries and compensation of certain personnel of the municipality of Princeton. I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. Is there anybody who'd like to speak to it? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Oh, okay.
Sorry, I had just one comment, and that is that there's a cover email or cover memo that goes with the information on salaries. And this year, there's a sentence that was eliminated from the cover that has been in other covers before, and I think would help a lot. And this sentence talks about the amount of the increase, assuming that there is one, and talks about the fact that it's been reviewed by the Personnel Committee. So I would suggest inserting that same sentence into this cover memo because I think it's helpful to have it.
Yeah, so this is, this will be having another salary ordinance later in the year that will pertain to whatever raise that will be for 2020. This was a more narrow change to the salary ordinance that had to do with just a couple positions. But the version you're talking about is coming, that usually comes more towards the spring with the budget. But yeah, thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak to this? I'd like to close the public hearing and bring it back to council. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move.
Moved by Ms. Fraga.
Second.
And seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Any other further comments or questions? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perron-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, and next we have, we'll do it after the ordinance public hearing. So next is ordinance 2020-4, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton adding alternate members to the Human Services Commission and amending section 2-69 of the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. And I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. Is there anybody who'd like to speak to it? Seeing no one. Do you want to speak to this one, Kip? No? Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing. I thought you were going to go 4 for 4. It's all right. All right. All right, I'll bring it back to council. Is there a motion to approve?
I would like to move that.
Moved by Ms. Fraga.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perron-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes. And that ordinance passes unanimously too. And there's been a request to move around some agenda items just to accommodate some of the folks who are here. So I just wanted to do a raising of hands. Is there anybody here for any of the ordinance introductions? No? Okay. And then what about for the, is that Ed back there? Are you here for the top resolutions? All right. And there's a couple folks here for the goals and priorities. And is there anything else anybody is waiting for in particular? Okay. So my recommendation is there a motion to amend the agenda to take up resolutions 1 through 4 and then go back to ordinance introductions?
So moved.
Second.
So the motion to amend the agenda was moved by Ms. Niedergang, seconded by Mr. Cohen. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we're going to be taking up resolutions 1 through 4. And then we'll go back to the rest of the agenda. Okay. So the first resolution is 20-52, resolution of need for Princeton Community Village Affordable Housing Development, Block 4401, Lot 2. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Are there any questions about this resolution? No? Anybody feel the need to comment? Nope. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 20-53. Resolution of need for Princeton Senior Living Affordable Housing Project, Block 5502. Wait, am I? Yeah. 5502, Lot 4. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
So it's been moved by Mr. Cohen, seconded by Ms. Fraga. Are there any questions
Yeah.
about this?
Yeah, I thought we were going to push this off with the redevelopment plan. This wasn't part of the redevelopment plan, this resolution, because it ties to the redevelopment plan, no?
I thought we were going to.
Okay, so should we hold this one then? Okay.
Thank you.
So if it's been moved and seconded, can we,
Do you need to do anything?
can
Table it?
somebody make another motion to hold it till the next meeting, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, I would just have, I mean, either whoever moved the approval tonight can withdraw their motion, or just somebody can make a motion to carry this to your meeting on the 30th.
I move to carry it to the meeting on Thursday.
Okay.
Second.
So it's been moved by Mr. Cohen to carry it to Thursday and seconded by
I second.
Ms. Pearl-Lambros. Any questions on that? All in favor of moving it?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we'll take this up on Thursday. Next is 20-54, resolution authorizing Princeton Community Housing to continue to serve as the administrative agent for the Princeton Affordable Housing Program for the calendar year 2020, not to exceed $36,768.
So moved.
Moved
Second.
by Mr. Williamson and seconded by Ms. Fraga. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. And next we come to Resolution 20-55, and I think we have some slides for this. Do we?
I saw it
On the slide deck? All right. Okay.
The meeting for Thursday was just published for the ordinance, so we need to do the resolution tonight.
Okay.
I'm not sure about
How can we
We're not ready to
do the resolution when we aren't they kind of contingent on each other?
I actually don't think that they are.
I think they are.
No one stated that the resolutions needed to be moved off the agenda, just the ordinance. So.
Okay, well, can we, in the interim, can someone bring up the slides and we'll do the goals and we'll come back to that and we'll, so this is the goals and priorities. There should be a slide. There should be the, let's do the one that's done by category, not the department one, but the other one. All right, well, this is getting set up. This is a process we do every year to set goals and priorities, and it always comes with the caveat that this is a living document ooh, that's pretty hard to see. Yeah, especially because you can't see it there. You know what, why don't we switch to the other one, because I think the text will be bigger. I'm sorry, do the one by department, because it'll be easier for everybody to see it who's here. So is that any better? Hopefully it's a little bit better. Is there a way to zoom in? Okay. So the goals this year, they're in two versions. So one is broken up by department, and then the other version is broken up more by the category of the goal. In the other version, you can see how each goal applies potentially to some larger goals we have, which include making the town more equitable, making the town more sustainable, helping with affordability, good governance, and the last one is helping to build community. So that's available online, but just so people can follow along and read, we'll use this version. So the goals here that are indicated by red means that it's a priority goal, and something that is a primary priority means that either it's something that's almost done because it's left over from 2019, it's something that is required by law, it's something that we have to complete in order to receive grant money, or for some other reason, the council or administration has identified it as a top immediate priority for us to address this year. If it's in orange, it indicates that it's something that either the volunteers on one of our boards, committees, and commissions can help move that goal forward, or it's something that is being worked on at the department level. So do you want to go through this? Do you want me to go through it? I'm fine either way. I can keep going. I'll do it. All right. So under administration and the clerk's office, we have remediation of the SOC site as one of the primary priorities for this year. We have 2 labor contracts that we need to negotiate this year. The ASME contract, which is with our Public Works Department, and the PBA contract with our police. In orange here, you'll see the shared services feasibility study with the school district, updating the agenda software and the minutes that you see online, development of a comprehensive GIS system, review of municipal facilities. This has to do with exploring if we can move the government functions that are currently at Monument Hall and bring them close to this building, so that it frees up Monument Hall for potentially better, higher use there, and can help with delivering better services to residents by having all of our governmental functions in one location. And expanding employee coaching services, renegotiating our interlocal agreement with Lawrence Township with the Eco Center. And then there are several goals listed here, which we'll get to in a minute, and that are cross-referenced under other departments. For mayor and council, one of the big goals this year is developing a communications plan, and there are a lot of secondary goals under here of better communication, and that includes meet the council hours, which should be a fun project, along with other things. Providing a liaison to the school capital planning effort, and I think this might be one of the first goals we can check off the list, right? Because I think David Cohen has offered himself as
it's already
this
happening.
liaison, so that's terrific. This one is in white, which is review role of council and personnel committee in hiring process generally, and just because I should mention, just because a goal is not labeled as red or orange doesn't mean it can't happen this year, but it has to be more of a project where there's not necessarily a guarantee of resources and staff time to get it done. And I should also, as just needs to be mentioned, that it's very difficult when we have a list of goals and we want to make all of them red, and we can't do that obviously because you just end up spinning yourself in a circle. So there were definitely some difficult decisions made in putting this together. For affordable housing, we have market housing rehabilitation program, especially to owners of older affordable units, hire a consultant to do inspections for the housing rehabilitation program, update and perfect the seamless doc application to purchase or rent a unit, develop policy recommendations addressing barriers to affordable housing, such as creditworthiness, use of Social Security numbers, etc. Develop policy recommendations to assist with enforcement of existing regulations related to hoarding. Develop policy position recommendations on state legislative matters impacting affordable housing. Restart quarterly roundtable with the Housing Authority and Princeton Community Housing for better communication among providers. For the Health Department and Animal Control, we have finalizing the 2020 strategic plan for Princeton Health Department and sharing that with the community. Ensuring adequate clinic access for vulnerable populations, and this has a number of more specific priorities under there. Evaluating staffing for the health department, including the acquisition of a full-time public health nurse. Establishing a strong emergency preparedness plan with a focus on health and wellness of all Princetonians. And there's several items under here, and Sustainable Princeton has been helping with this as well. Increase the percentage of dogs that are licensed. And then for the goals that aren't red or orange, we have assess access and affordability of behavioral health services, explore ways to encourage mental health providers to stay here and open offices, convene community discussion on legalization of cannabis and what that will mean for the individual and community health in Princeton, and reduce the incidence of zoonotic diseases such as rabies. For Corner House, we have transition new grant and development coordinator into organization and develop new grant and funding strategies consistent with the Corner House and Board of Health strategic plan. Implementation of bilingual Spanish clinical treatment services and providing outreach to the Latino community to make sure they're aware of the service availability. Training clinical staff in family therapy. For the Princeton Alcohol and Drug Alliance, we have used extra grant funding to cover current alcohol and drug prevention programming. For Human Services, they're going to be conducting a 2020 needs assessment, engaging our community partners, continue advancing welcoming efforts through policy changes and training opportunities, increase efforts to improve workers' rights, with specific regard to wage theft and worker safety, and collaborate with Sustainable Princeton and the Health Department to advocate for the health and safety of these workers during severe weather conditions. You know what, I think at this hour, I don't know how useful it is to read through all of these. So, you know, I think I can give an overview of, with the other way that the goals are laid out, where the words are going to be too small for people to read, unfortunately. It broke the goals into several categories. So one were our strategic planning goals, which go across several departments. We had another category about improving health, public safety, and quality of life. We had another set of goals that had to do with preserving Princeton's unique sense of place, increasing sustainability and reducing carbon emissions, increasing access to affordable housing, supporting economic development, enhancing communication and collaboration, and then finally ensuring proper staffing and training. And for each of those goals, again, we looked at how they applied to equity, good governance, sustainability, affordability, and building community. The goals that are in red are ones that are marked as primary. We want to get through those first. The orange goals are secondary. And again, the ones that are in white, we hope to get to this year, but we're focusing our resources on the other ones first. And the plan, we usually don't get to this until later in the year. So one of my personal goals was to have this set of goals before council in January for us to vote on, to give us some direction. Yeah. Well, thanks to all of you too. This is going to be a two-step process. So we have to come back with a work plan for these. And so we're going to be sending out a call for more information to come back. So for each of the goals, for each of the BCCs and each of the departments, we're going to be asking for breaking down that goal. What are the different steps? What are the different milestones? Some of them are a little more broad than others, so I think that exercise will help to really squeeze things down to determine what are we actually trying to accomplish this year with each of these particular goals. And you'll see that some of the goals will say they help with good governance, but the good governance box is not filled out. And I think it would help for our records and just for our clarity to be able to articulate how each of these goals addresses what we're saying it helps to address. I know that there are some concerns about things that were not highlighted as goals. So first I want to open it up to council to see if there's anything anybody has a concern about at this point. We'll open it up to see if there's comments from the public that are here, and then I'm hoping we can adopt some version of this tonight. So, yeah, Mr. Cohen?
So I'm really happy to see a bunch of members of the Bicycle Advisory Committee here, although I'm not sure whether it's an indication that I've been falling down on the job as the liaison to the Bike Committee, or just that I have a really enthusiastic and excellent committee that I'm liaising to. But I do want to give a little good news, which is I have been pursuing since our last meeting with the BCCs the viability of getting a bike parking ordinance in place this year, in particular working with the council, to not the council IL, but the council EL, SEL, to see what kind of labor would be involved in writing the ordinance. And just heard today that Trishka is confident that it's something that we can get in place this year. It's the information that was provided by the committee, and in terms of the rates of parking and the information that was provided in the bike master plan regarding the design or the technical requirements for the parking to be provided were complete enough that she feels she can write an ordinance fairly efficiently. So I thought that was good news. And
so would you be proposing that we made, so it's 413 it looks like, the bike parking ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
Would you recommend making that orange then, labeling that as orange?
Yeah, if I guess staff priorities ended up
staff and BCC priorities. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that would be good. And then I don't want to steal the members' thunder, so I'm going to let them push the rest of you guys on the installation of bike boulevards.
And I just wanted to mention something that I sent an email about earlier, and if Jenny Krumiller were still here, I would apologize to her for falling down on the job. So one of the things that we talked about last year and had a special council meeting on was on speeding reduction and implementation of a plan to address the streets that had the most egregious speeding. But because this particular goal did not fit under any one committee, it somehow got overlooked. So I'm hoping, I know that our engineer, Ms. Stockton, can maybe speak to this, that this is something that engineering is in process of implementing in any case because of the decisions taken last year by council. So I'm not sure where we would put this exactly, but I would love to see it added in, and as for coloring, I guess orange or I don't know. Orange, okay. I don't know the best place that it fits in the matrix.
Okay, and what would you say? What are you calling it? Like pedestrian safety improvements, or what?
What did we call our
It's traffic calming, wasn't it?
Traffic calming?
Traffic calming. I mean, it involves pedestrian and bike safety, but residential concern. So yeah, traffic implementation of the traffic calming study and overlay that was passed last year.
Okay. All right. We should look here, and I mean, I think that falls under, so just so we can give it a number, I think it falls under increasing sustainability and reducing carbon emissions, or it would fall under, what's this one? My computer's not working very well. Sorry.
Is there health?
Yeah,
I
there's
mean,
number
it
two.
could potentially go under health.
Yeah, improve health, public safety, and quality of life. It probably fits
I think
best
I like
under
that
there.
better there. Yeah.
Okay, so it should get like a two number. Why don't we give it 224?
224 it is.
Okay. Yep. Is there anybody else?
I just wanted to get some clarification. So for Civil Rights Commission and Youth Advisory, I see items 708, 709, and then for Youth Advisory, 710 and 711. There's no color there. At one point, I remember when we were doing the goal setting, I had them in pink. That was the color that was assigned for the committee, something that the committee was going to be working on without any staff time or that it was it's more of something that the committees were already doing, but they're expanding on.
I think that might have just been an oversight, so that's why we're having this discussion. So that's for 710 and 711.
For, yes, for Youth Advisory, and then under Civil Rights Commission, 7.8 and 7.9.
7, 8, and 7, 9, okay.
So those are items where they are just basically expanding the work from last year.
Okay.
Continuing and expanding.
Anyone else?
So, did we make a final decision about whether some of the initial actions, like the green building plan, the harmonization, some of the other elements that we're going to be working on would be adopted? I had made the recommendation that those be all grouped under the heading of beginning work under the master plan, and I don't see that reflected in here.
Let's see, they are,
because working on the master plan itself was a goal, but I think at a certain point we decided that there are lots of things that we're already doing, which are part of,
right.
part of the
So,
master plan. I just I think it's useful for the community to become conversant with the notion of the master plan as the heading of all of this, thematically, that these are all activities that are part of the master planning process.
okay, so there's two items, and you're saying you want them combined. So there's 101.
There's, Michael, what do you think? What's that? So it's great.
They're all under the planning. And
All
I
under
think they're
planning.
fine. I think they're fine the way
You think
they
they're
are.
fine, David? Yeah.
I do. They're listed individually.
My issue was just that okay, so we've still got master plan in there, but it's
white. Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to make the point that rather than putting the master plan as a separate goal on its own, and I don't think we're going to be able to do much on the master plan beyond these other aspects that are related to it, like neighborhood character, I think will involve, will involve making changes to the master plan. Certainly the housing element will be part of the affordable housing settlement. I mean, I think it's fine. It would be great at some point to convey that we are making progress on the master plan this year, and these are the specific items that we're tackling first.
Okay.
I think I made my point.
I mean, I would say maybe when it comes back with the work plan, if there's adjustments to the language, we can do it then. Yeah. Are there any other recommendations for changes or additions? Okay, I'd like to open it up then, if anybody from the public would like to speak.
Kip Cherry, 24 Dempsey. There are three areas I just wanted to bring up to you. The first one is fire safety related to affordable housing. And I know that Grace Sidden was planning to bring that up, and so now we have it on our list for the THANET discussion. The THANET building, we don't know that much about the THANET proposal at this point. I mean, we citizens, at least I don't. But the two buildings that are there are steel construction. So the issues that we have with stick construction don't apply to steel. We don't know whether they plan to put in some other units around the two steel structures that might be stick. So, but the timing of our concerns relates to the timing of this kind of development and whether we need to move forward. As you know, the fire safety issue is a state building code issue. However, the municipalities have the authority and the responsibility to handle fire safety during construction. So that would be the area that we would approach, and that's the area we've been discussing quite a bit with David Cohen. And it's not an easy thing to write, and so we don't have it all done at this point. We know a lot of pieces, but we don't have it all coherent. And, we don't know the timing. If there's something that's about ready to happen, then we got to move it up. Otherwise, we're not going to do anything yet, probably.
Right. So I can tell you for the construction, with the affordable housing, when we have the option, when we're doing redevelopment and we have a developer's agreement, for example, we're pushing for the same concessions we were able to get from Avalon Bay at the hospital site. So building to the 13 standard, not 13R, doing the masonry firewalls. We heard that there has been a change in the federal law that requires there to be a fire watch when there's not active work on site. We haven't seen the legislation on this, but we were told by one of the developers actually that this was now the law. So we have to do our due diligence on that, obviously, but it was certainly heartening to hear. And they actually gave Princeton credit for it, or they said that there was a group from New Jersey that was pushing and was one of the reasons why it got passed. So we said, we know those people. So
we'll check on that.
Our best protection is if it's in the rules for everybody, because then there's no question. And that is the greatest victory you guys could have really achieved for everybody. So, we're going to be following up on that. But our understanding at this moment is that they're required to have a fire watch when there's not work being done on the site. So that would involve like overnight or when there's not construction going on.
Well, I'll check on that. I mean, pretty much the implementation has been through the National Building Code and has not come through federal legislation, so, and been implemented by the states. And New Jersey has been adopting a code. They're always behind. But the fire watch has been in the code, and some of the other issues that we have are in the code. But there are other things related to, for instance, firewalls that go up through the roof. And that's an issue that still isn't being implemented yet, and that's still something that we've been trying to get state legislation on. So, we've been working with Weinberg on that, And she basically has taken the point of view, as we understand it anyway, that she's scrapping all previous legislation. She's developing a whole new bill, and we don't have that new bill yet. But we've been working on this now for, 4 or 5 years maybe, at least. So more than that. So anyway, she's the point person, Senator Weinberg. The other two things I wanted to bring up are, first of all, the dinky and the completion of the implementation of the MOU. And I would argue that we still have not completed implementing the MOU, and time's a wasting, and now we understand that New Jersey Transit has started a study, and we don't quite see in the listing that the Princeton Planet folks got exactly what we are thinking about in terms of the dinky. And we have a railroad owner who is interested in buying the dinky, but it's a complex purchase. It's not just that he comes in and says, okay, here's my cash. He wants the community involved, and it's more complicated, and the timing is his and not ours. So we haven't figured out what to do now that we found out about this study, which apparently, and we're told that the contractor has not been, the consultant hasn't been selected yet, but everything's very hazy. And so we're not sure what steps we need to take, or what we might recommend to you regarding the nature of the study and making sure that the concerns that we have are included in that study. It seems to have been a study that was implemented by, or initiated by the university, and we still don't seem to be quite on the same wavelength all the way on when it comes to the dinky and its future. The third thing I just wanted to mention real quick is, and I don't want to get into a big discussion or anything, but in your communications plan, as you know, I'm still very concerned about Princeton TV and how it fills a media hole that I don't think social media fills. So I just want to throw that out there, and it's not up to me to initiate or negotiate or do anything else. So I'm just Joe Blow citizen bringing it up, squeaky hinge, and so I just want to mention that's still hanging out there. Thank you very much.
Hi, Lori Harmon, of the Vice Chair of the Princeton Bicycle Advisory Committee. I'd like to thank you for considering the Vision Zero and, of course, the bike parking ordinance this year in your goals. I'd also like to urge you to consider the PBAC goals of continuing the implementation of the bike mobility element of the master plan. Bicycle transportation ties in well with many of the goals of this town and its efforts toward addressing climate change, affordability, equity, diversity, and wellness. The implementation of the bicycle mobility plan should be given a higher priority as we look to the future of our town. Transportation alternatives are an important element of the climate action plan, which Mayor and Council supported last year. Transportation alternatives are also a major element in the application for the Bloomberg Challenge Champion City, which is listed in your 2020 goals. With the planning of new affordable housing units being made, attention should be given to safe cycling routes. Walking, biking, and public transit may be the only transportation options for many of the residents. Princeton has received grants for safe routes to school, and some of these improvements will be happening this year and next year. Students are being encouraged to ride to school and into town, and many of them do so already. It should be a priority to provide a continuous network of signed lanes and shared paths to improve their safety. Princeton prides itself on being an age-friendly community, which was designated in 2016. The application for this designation referenced our designation as a bike-friendly community and the importance of the availability of alternative transportation, including bicycling. Bicycling also ties in with the Mayor's Wellness Campaign, which honors towns which have made healthy lifestyle as a top priority. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tina Catillo, 79 Dempsey Avenue. I would like to thank you all very much for your ambitious goals for this year. In particular, putting the Vision Zero on the map, and also the Hamilton-Wiggins engineering study, as well as the bicycle parking study, really. I can see that you have a lot on your plate. I really love the new communications initiative, by the way. And of course, you're going to be working on affordable housing. You know what really makes housing affordable? If you don't need a car to get there. So I looked up the true cost to own of my car. I own this itty-bitty Volkswagen Golf. It costs $500 a month to own and drive and maintain and insure and all that stuff. So if you could do without a car, you save, you know, maybe not 500 because maybe you didn't buy it new, but a few $100s per month. If you can get around by bike, by walking, or by public transport instead. I would also like to point out that our climate action plan calls for a reduction of our emissions by half by 2030, 2035, which is not that long from now. And we really need to start building safe bike and walk infrastructure in order for that to happen. Because if it's not safe, we won't do it. I would also like to point out that we are probably at peak car. So to ask you to do anything that you plan with cars, to do it so that it is reversible, because when the number of cars goes down, you don't want to be caught flat-footed. Because you know what? The signs are that the electrification of our transportation, which is going to be quite disruptive, is not going to come from the electric vehicle. That is to say, it is. But my next electric vehicle is much more likely to have 2 wheels than 4. And so it is with many young people. Just walk around on campus, any campus. You see these e-bikes, e-scooters, and we need to make space for them. There's already lots of complaints that they are on the sidewalk. I agree. They should not be on the sidewalk. They should be in their own designated spot so that they don't threaten the pedestrians and so that the cars don't threaten us. Finally, I would like to talk to you about sea level rise. As you know, I'm from the Netherlands. My parental house was 6 feet below the current sea level. I was born in a low-lying place. I went to college in a place that used to be called Little Cove. So I feel sea level rise on a visceral level. And when earlier this week, or actually last week, a report came out that quantified how many people get displaced, get flooded out of their homes by every centimeter of sea level rise, I perked up my ears. It's actually a lot. And since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the sea levels have risen by 8 inches, 20 centimeters. So I took that number, and I took the number of the new study, and I took the number of carbon dioxide emissions that the whole world has done so far to get to those 8 inches of sea level rise. And I estimated how many people lose their homes because a town like ours, 10,000 cars, drive the American average 15,000 miles a year, every year. Turns out the number is 8. 8 people are displaced every year due to our driving. Okay, so this number, people will slap me around for it. It is a very back of the envelope estimate. Could be 1, it could be 100. So there's a lot, but you know, it's in that kind. I just needed to know if it was going to be 10,000 or like, you know, we don't have to worry about it. But I think we do need to worry about it. And even if we can reduce our emissions by enough to save 1 person from losing their homes due to flooding, I think it would be worth it. Thank you.
thank you all for hearing my fellow committee members and for taking the time to listen to us. Clearly, we're a passionate group. It's 10-something, and there are 4 of us here, plus our liaison and our staff liaison. So without further ado, I wanted to remind you that the goals of our committee are to promote biking and walking and to advise council and the mayor on safety, the character, and the location of bike and pedestrian facilities. I joined the committee 7-8 years ago because I was concerned about the safety of a little boy in our house and wanting to make sure that I could make a difference. We moved here 18 years ago, excuse me, and we chose Princeton because it had a concentrated downtown, it had trail networks and availability of places to both walk and bike. We came from Europe, and at the time that we moved here, Europe, specifically Paris and London, were just beginning to implement their bike networks. 18 years ago to now, it has made a huge difference. But what they did and what they decided back then was very brave. And what we're asking you all to consider is to be brave as well, and to be leaders in this region, to realize, excuse me, that there is a large pent-up demand for these bike lanes, for pedestrian improvements, and there's also a safety issue. I received not long ago the report of 2019 for pedestrian crashes and bicycle crashes. There were 11 pedestrian crashes reported to the police. 10 of them took place in the crosswalk. I don't need to remind most of you that the crosswalk is a legal place for a pedestrian to be, and here they are getting hit by cars, and sometimes with serious injuries. One of them fatal. There were 18 incidents with bicycles, and those oftentimes were where the bicyclist was at fault, but why was he at fault, or she? Because they were traveling on the sidewalk because they were too concerned to travel on the roadway because there's no safe facility for them to ride their bike. There have been several articles and studies recently released in the mainstream media like Forbes, where a study from Deloitte, a global consultancy, says that of the 5 most important technological advances that they want to watch in 2020, number 1 was 5G, number 2 was the electric, or rather the availability of e-bikes and e-scooters. That's not technology, that's biking. And I need to make sure that everyone here realizes that from Boston to New York to Philly to DC to Chicago to the West Coast, all of these cities have this available. And when Princeton and its position in the Northeast Corridor, then with its presence of the university, attracts people from all of these places, they're going to come here expecting to be able to freely travel on an e-bike, an e-scooter, a regular bike, to walk to work. And we, as a town, owe it to our residents and our visitors to make this a safer place for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Okay, I'm going to bring it back to council now. So taken some notes on the changes that we want to make. After we heard the comments, I don't know if there's anything else anybody would like to add. So this is what I've written down, is that we're going to add a new goal, 2-24, implementation of traffic calming recommendations, and make it orange. And then we're going to make several things that don't have a color right now orange, and that includes 413, which is the bike parking ordinance, 414, which are bike boulevards, 78, which is CRC, community options. I'm not sure if my notes on that are right. 7-9, facilitate community dialogue on reparations. 7-10, some events that the Youth Advisory Committee wants to do, the middle school milestone and alumni events. And 7-11, which is another Youth Advisory Committee goal, which is to build partnerships with other groups in the community. Did that capture all the changes?
I think so.
Okay, so is there a motion to approve the goal list with the changes I just rattled off?
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Ms. Niedergang and seconded by Ms. Fraga. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so the goals passed unanimously. Thank you. And we'll be coming back with something that has the work plans and a calendar of when we're going to try to accomplish all this. But in the meantime, people can start working on whatever they have under their name. I'm going to ask Trishka if you have some guidance for us about the 20-52 resolution, 53, sorry, resolution.
Yes, Mayor. You cannot move it to the meeting on the 30th because that's a special meeting and how it was noticed. This particular resolution really has to do with financing for the senior project. It does not have to be in place prior to the fairness hearing. So my suggestion is, why don't you just carry it to your next regular meeting on February 10th and
Okay.
take it up at that time.
So I do need another motion then to move resolution. Well, do we need to move it? We do need to move it because we've already moved it to a meeting where we're not going to have it. So we should have it.
I would,
Okay.
yeah, I would just
So
make it clear.
Is there a
So
motion
moved.
to move 2053 to February 10th?
So moved.
Second.
So it's been moved by Ms. Niedergang, seconded by Ms. Pearl-Lambros. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we'll be taking up this poor resolution then. And now we're going to go back up to the ordinance introductions for this evening. The first is ordinance 2020-5, an ordinance of the municipality of Princeton regarding projecting signs and amending Chapter 17A of the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and Chapter 10B of the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. I want to thank Josh Jinder for his help in putting together this ordinance, as well as Michael Laplace and our planning officials. This has been talked about for a very long time, and it's great that it's finally coming before us. I don't know if there's any questions from council,
No,
or if there's a motion to introduce.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment too, to thank them and say that they worked really hard. The EDC, it was really a big priority, and it's a great first step, so thank you.
Right, and I also want to thank the Historic Preservation Commission too, because they were the ones that I think had a different, this was a big ask, because it is a big change to how the town has been in our more recent history. And, you know, I think government works best when you get everybody in a room and you try to hash out a solution that is going to address the greatest need. And so I do want to thank them for their flexibility and for, you know, taking a leap of faith on this. So we're hoping that it's going to be a really great thing.
Can I just ask a quick question? I'm just noticing that for this ordinance, the public hearing is listed as the 24th. I just want to make sure that's intended.
Right, that's correct. The reason for that is this needs to go to the planning board for their review. And ZARC, the Zoning Amendment Review Committee, has also been working on this as well. Yeah.
Great.
Okay, so is there a motion to introduce? It's
So
been
moved.
moved by Ms. Pearl-Lambros. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Cohen. Any other questions or comments from the anybody in the public? All right, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perone Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
So the ordinance has been introduced. The public hearing will be on February 24th, 2020. Next is ordinance 2020-6, an ordinance of the municipality of Princeton authorizing the acquisition and subsequent conveyance of a 28% interest in the 394 Ridgeview Road, Block 2001, Lot 22, open space parcel.
Mayor
Yep,
Lampert,
sorry.
I need to recuse myself as an employee of the watershed, which has an interest in this property. So-
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to introduce?
I'd like to. And can I comment how I just am so excited to see this coming before council now. I was on zoning board at the time this came before zoning board, so it's been a long process, and I'm just thankful that all the parties came together and supported it, so I'd love to make the motion. to
Great, all right.
approve.
So it's been moved by Ms. Pearl-Lambros and
I'll second.
seconded by Mr. Cohen. Any questions or comments on this? Any comments from the public? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perone Lambros?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
The ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing will be on February 10th. Did Eve go far? Nope, come on back. All right, next is Resolution 2056, resolution approving professional services agreement for Hodelick and Morrison, PA, for purposes of preparing an annual audit and related financial services on behalf of Princeton in an amount not to exceed $54,200. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Mr. Cohen, seconded by Ms. Niedergang. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 2057, resolution authorizing a professional services agreement with McMahon and Associates for personal traffic engineering consulting services for the purpose of reviewing development applications on behalf of Princeton's land use boards for 2020 in an amount not to exceed $25,000. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved
Second.
by Mr. Cohen, seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Any questions or comments?
I just want to comment that I had the opportunity to sit in on the interview with this company and found them really impressive, and they have a lot of credentials around alternative transportation and stuff, so really happy to.
And I'm sad the bike committee folks left, but you should let them know too. And I think everybody who met with them is really excited. They've done a lot of work in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and other college towns, and hopefully will bring some good guidance to us. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 2058, resolution approving 2020 professional services agreement with the Law Office of Karen Casey, Esquire, for the Princeton Zoning Board of Adjustment attorney in an amount not to exceed $20,000. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Williamson.
Second.
And seconded by Ms. Pearl-Lambros. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 2059, resolution authorizing a contract award to Remington Vernick Engineers, RVE, in the amount not to exceed $129,025.64 for construction management, construction inspection services for the federally funded Harrison Street Signals Project. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Niedergang. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Fraga, and I want to compliment our engineer, Deanna Stockton. This is another exciting thing to have on the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passed unanimously. Next is 2060, resolution authorizing the award of a contract to National Auto Fleet Group via the Sourcewell contract for the purchase of 3 Chevrolet pickup trucks with plows in the amount of $134,569.62. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen. Is there a
Second.
second? Seconded by Ms. Fraga. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 2061, resolution authorizing the award of a contract to Mid-State Equipment via the Sourcewell contract for the purchase of a Kubota Model F3990 with mower deck, snowplow, and snowblower in the amount of $37,034.13. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Cohen, seconded by Ms. Fraga. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 2062, resolution authorizing the award of a contract to GT Mid-Atlantic Groff via the Sourcewell contract for snow removal equipment in the amount of $18,303. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next, we come to the consent agenda, which contains items of routine nature, passed by single vote. Are there any items anyone would like removed from the consent agenda? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
That was the tie. I think I'm going to give it to Ms. Niedergang. You were louder. Moved by Ms. Niedergang, seconded by Ms. Fraga. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. And do we still have energy to go back into closed session?
I move that we go back into closed session.
All right.
Second.
So,
Can we have a 2-minute break?
yeah, we're going to have a 2-minute break. All in favor of moving to closed session?
Aye.
Aye.